All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, good to see everybody here. It is 1 p.m. on June 4th of 2024, and I am calling to order the Landmark Preservation Commission meeting. Very first thing that we do is introduce ourselves, the commission members anyway, and I'll go ahead since I'm already talking. My name is Julie Johnson. I am a Historic Preservation Project Manager, and I was nominated by the community at large. Graham, can you take it away?
My name is Graham Johnson, also a Preservation Project Manager and nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
My name is Larry Sykes. I'm an architect and I was nominated by History Colorado.
My name is Gary Petrie. I'm an architect and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hello, I'm George Dennis. I'm retired law enforcement nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Nick Fusianos. I'm an architect and a developer, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
And I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large.
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
All right, thanks everybody. The very first item of agenda is the meeting records for our meeting on May 21st. Commissioners, do you have any questions, any corrections on said minutes as presented? If not, could I hear a motion to approve as presented?
I'll move to approve the minutes for the May 21st meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. Second?
Second.
I think Gary seconded it. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Abstain.
Abstained.
Abstain.
We have two
Not being
abstentions.
present there.
Okay, all right, two abstentions, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It still passes. Yep. Okay, so we're good. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, staff. All right. So let's go over, we had some internet issues in the building apparently yesterday. So happy to see all the people here in person. We also do have some people joining us virtually. And for those of you joining us virtually, we have a few tips that we like to go over at the beginning. For better sound quality, we strongly encourage you to download Zoom on your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, or mobile device. You can click the audio settings to bring up an additional menu, add a background noise suppression, test your speaker and microphone, adjust the maximum output volumes. For presenters, if you're joining us virtually, or public commenters, when it is your turn to speak, to mute or unmute, you can click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. Expanding the menu next to the microphone will reveal additional options. You can select your speaker and microphone devices, and you can test your microphone and speakers and adjust their maximum output volumes. If you still have audio challenges, you can switch to your phone for audio. All righty. The first thing that we have is a public comment period. And this is for the members of the public to have up to 2 minutes each for comments about historic preservation in general. These would not include comments associated with any projects that we're hearing about later today. To speak, you can, if you want to give a public comment here, just raise your hand and we'll let you speak. If you're joining us virtually and you'd like to talk about historic preservation in general, you can click the hand raise button in Zoom, dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you're joining by phone, or email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number if you are having difficulty with either the hand raise option. Anybody here in person that wants to speak about preservation in general? Okay, there's nobody here. Anybody joining us virtually that would like to speak about just a general comment about preservation? Doesn't look like it? Okay, great. All right, then since there is no public comment, let's go on to our consent agenda. These are routine design review items recommended for the commission approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on this consent agenda should coordinate separately with the Landmark Preservation staff to receive a certificate of appropriateness. There is no public comment for consent agenda items. The way it works is that I will announce the consent agenda by address. I will ask commissioners if they desire to remove anything off of the consent agenda, at which point it would be put onto the design review portion of our meeting. Commission members can announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on any items. and the commission can make a motion and will vote. And just so you all know, the Landmark Preservation Commission can only consider information included in the application materials on the LPC meeting website. All right, then, so I will go ahead and announce what we've got on the consent agenda today. We have, first up is 2024-TAXC-006 at 2217 Grove Street in Winter Caulfield. 2024-COA-157 at 801-803 29th Street in Curtis Park. 2024-COA-277 at 375 Gilpin Street in the Country Club District. 2024-COA-278 at 2115 Lenard Place in Clements. 2023-COA-383 at 722 High Street in East 7th Avenue. And the last is 2023-COA-384 636 Gaylord Street on East 7th Avenue. Okay, commissioners, does anybody have any desire to take anything off? Nick?
I do. I think that 375 Gilpin Street bears further discussion
Okay.
as it relates to the guidelines associated with garages.
Oh, okay, all right. Commissioners, anything else? All right, then do I hear a motion from the floor?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the consent agenda, short of the High Street,
Gilpin,
Gilpin, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Country Club, Gilpin.
there you go.
All right, thanks, Graham. Second,
I'll second.
Erica has seconded it. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, great. And then we will see the 375 Gilpin Street Country Club. That will be the first item that we see in the design review projects. Everybody else can be dismissed. You can either you can obviously continue to enjoy joining us at the meeting, or you can leave the meeting and be in touch with your with the Landmark Preservation staff that you've been working with. Meeting. All right, then we have a public hearing process. We have 3 items. First, the chair will announce a public hearing agenda by address. The commission members will announce any ex parte contacts and conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and make a recommendation. Commissioners can question the staff. Then the applicant has 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes to make the presentation, and commissioners can question the applicant. Public comment period will be 3 minutes per person for public comment. If you're here in person and would like to make a comment, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that you get your chance. And then you would come and have a seat at the table while you make your comment. And then if anyone joining us virtually you'd like to, you can speak regarding a specific project and you are not part of that applicant team, please click on your hand raise button. For those calling on your phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. If you are having difficulty with either hand raise option, you can email us at landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number. Staff will have a chance to clarify if necessary. The commission will deliberate and the commission will make a motion and vote. And again, the LPC can only consider information included in the application materials on the LPC meeting website. All right, the first item in public hearing, and then I have to call public hearing to order, right?
Not for this one.
Not for this one, okay. All right, okay, so the first public hearing item is, we are simply setting a date certain. It is 2024-LMDEMO-119 at 2650 Welton Street in 5 Points. It's for total roof demolition, and the recommendation is to set the public hearing for July 9, 2024. Commissioners, do I hear a motion to set that date?
I so move.
All right, thank you, Gary. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And Graham has seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, so we have set the public hearing date for 2024-LMDEMO-119 at 2650 Welton Street for July 9, 2024. All right, so the second, we'll call to order the public hearing. Sorry about that. And it is, 8 after 1 o'clock. And the first one is 2024-LMDEMO at 097. And it's 1600 East Colfax Avenue in the Wyman District. And Brittany Bryant is our staff person.
So our first application for design or public hearing today is for total demolition of a contributing structure in the Wyman Historic District. The Wyman Historic District period of significance is prior to and including 1955. And originally this structure was constructed in 1893. So the structure located at 1600 East Colfax Avenue was constructed between 1893 and 1895 with a storefront addition constructed circa 1938. So the entirety of the structure is within the period of significance for the Wyman Historic District. Additionally, this structure is identified as a contributing structure on a map submitted as part of the designation application for the Wyman Historic District, and staff finds that it does contribute to the character, interest, and value of the city as for the reasons the Wyman Historic District was designated. In the late 1800s, with Denver population booming and the Cheeseman Park neighborhood along East Colfax Avenue is emerging as an attractive residential area and a gateway into downtown due to the advent of the cable car, mansions were built along East Colfax. However, with traffic increasing in the early 1900s, developers began to push for this portion of the corridor to become increasingly commercial. After 1905, no new single-family residences were built on East Colfax between Broadway and Garfield Street. In 1925, the city of Denver adopted a zoning code that primarily identified East Colfax as a commercial corridor, and the city's first master plan described East Colfax as formerly a principal residential street and now with large part zone for business and the principal artery through Capitol Hill and the apartment district. With the new zoning, the streets were widened and many of the Colfax properties along the avenue lost their trees and front lawns. Again, that's when 1600 East Colfax in 1938 had the commercial storefront added. In November 2017, Panda Holdings purchased the properties and began conversations with Denver Landmark Preservation about redevelopment opportunities for this property and the adjacent vacant parking lot to the south. Both 1600 and 1618 East Colfax have been boarded up for a number of years while the property owners work through a rehabilitation and redevelopment plan for these properties. Initially, JVA consultant engineers were brought out to the properties to assess the condition of the properties, and a window replacement and rehabilitation plan was reviewed by the commission in July of 2021 as part of the site development plan to redevelop this site, and again, the site to the south, which is known as 1450 Franklin Street. However, in March of 2024, 1600 East Colfax was engulfed in a fire, which caused a significant amount of damage. On March 28th, 2024, the city issued a notice of unsafe structure, which you have as part of your package. And then JVA consultant was brought out to reevaluate both of the properties again and did note significant fire damage to 1600 East Colfax. So here we just have some current photos of the building, and you can see the massing of the original mansion and the 1938 storefront. And then you can see the photos from JVA, which show a significant amount of fire damage. Initially, this building did have a skylight in the roof and an oval staircase, which you can see in these images here. That did contribute to the overall character of this building. And then finally, I just have some images of the property when they were historic mansions, then the widening of the Colfax Avenue, and then finally photos from the 1980s showing that commercial storefront. So due to the fire damage caused to this property, the applicant has applied for total demolition of this structure. Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, colloquially known as the Landmark Ordinance, states that the findings of the commission shall be based on consideration of specific design standards, presented plans, public testimony, and related findings of fact. If an application for demolition is approved, the commission shall require a replacement structure or other site plan as condition of the demolition approval. Landmark staff did evaluate this property based on, again, on chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code and what it means to be contributing. So the definition of contributing means a structure or feature that adds to the historical, architectural, geographical, or cultural significance of a structure for preservation or a structure in a district in preservation. So staff do find that 1600 East Colfax Avenue is a contributing structure to the Wyman Historic District. Again, it was identified as contributing in a map included with the application for designation. The historic mansion and streamlined modern addition were constructed within the district's period of significance, which again is prior to and including 1955. And the structure contributes to the understanding of the historic development of the Colfax corridor, which portrays distinctive architectural styles. In this case, a Denver Square with classical detailing that has a streamlined, modern commercial addition added to it, and is part of a distinctive area, which is Wyman's addition to the city of Denver. Additionally, as part of evaluation, if this structure is appropriate to be demolished, staff did do an integrity assessment. And integrity, again, is defined in chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. And the definition states that there are 7 qualities that in various combinations define integrity. These are very similar to what the National Register uses for the 7 aspects of integrity, but they are slightly different. So the 7 qualities of integrity are location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. So staff did find that this structure is within its original location and that the location of the building site has not changed. The setting of this property has been retained with a while the large front lawn is no longer intact. The 1938 commercial addition is part of the period of significance and does contribute to the original setting of the structure. In terms of design, the 4-square form of the historic mansion is apparent even though the classical details that made up the original front porch and projecting ground floor window are no longer evident. The streamlined modern addition does maintain its curved corner with large horizontal windows and pilasters that are indicative of this style of architecture. In terms of materials, the original brick construction of the historic mansion and addition are intact, although in poor condition due to years of neglect and also the fire that happened in March. In terms of workmanship, prior to the fire, the interior of 1600 East Colfax Avenue did have physical evidence of craft with the oval staircase and skylight in the center. And then the streamlined modern addition does have that curved corner, which again is another example of craft and a unique building feature that relates to the architectural style of that addition. In terms of filling, no significant changes have been made to 1600 East Colfax since the property was designated as part of the Wyman Historic District in 1993. That would negate the aesthetic or historic sense of the structure's status as contributing to the Wyman Historic District. And then finally, association. 1600 East Colfax has a direct link to the development of East Colfax Avenue from a residential street with large mansions to a commercial corridor. There are several mansions along Colfax that have this configuration. However, 1600 and 1618 East Colfax Avenue are the only structures designated for preservation as part of the Wyman Historic District that encompass this history. So staff finds that the structure maintains integrity in all qualities of all qualities of integrity with material and workmanship in view of attention due to several years of neglect and the recent fire. And then finally, we did evaluate the property based on the design guidelines. So we looked specifically at design guideline 2.5H, which states do not demolish contributing buildings to a historic district or historic buildings with individual landmark designation. And the guideline further states take all measures required to repair and retain a contributing or landmark historic structure to protect the community interest in preservation. Again, as we have found 1600 East Colfax Avenue as a contributing structure, we do feel that it is not meeting this guideline, and the structure has either been underutilized or vacant for a number of years, resulting in severe deterioration. However, all measures should be taken to restore and preserve the structure as it was identified as significant in the application for designation. So therefore, we are recommending denial of this request to demolish.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brittany. Commissioners, questions for staff? Nope. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brittany. So the applicant team that would like to make the presentation can come up to the table. And you'll have 10 minutes.
10 minutes for this one and 10 minutes for the next.
Correct. Then 10 minutes, yeah, 10 minutes for each project.
Cool.
Yes, okay. And at the beginning of the 10 minutes, if you could please give your name and address for our records, that would be great.
Whenever y'all are ready.
Kylie Wilson, 32 Sedgwick Drive, Englewood, Colorado. Good afternoon. My name is Kylie Wilson. I'm a managing member of the group responsible for the properties at 1600 and 1618 Colfax. Today, I am here to revisit the previously determined historical significance of our properties and to explain why, despite our best efforts, demolition is now the only viable option. First, the designation of the properties as historically contributing structures was controversial to begin with. Winter and Company, historic preservation experts who work nationally to help communities design and manage preservation programs, evaluated the properties in 2018 and determined that the loss of context, as well as the loss of key features of the buildings themselves, had diminished the integrity of the property so much that they did not meet the criteria of the Landmark Preservation Ordinance. Their key findings noted that the buildings lack integrity as historic resources due to significant alterations, additions, and removal of architectural features, that they shouldn't have been included in the Wyman Historic District boundary, and that no official record indicates these properties are contributing or why they should be classified as such. The LPC staff report references a map that identifies contributing and non-contributing structures in the Wyman Historic District as the basis for designation. However, the ordinance adopted in 1993 states that contributing structures are not included as part of the ordinance. When the LPC determined the buildings must be preserved, we moved forward with the plans to rehabilitate and redevelop the properties. However, ongoing challenges, including vandalism and a major fire, have impacted the structures to the point where salvaging and rehabilitating the properties, as proposed, is not feasible. The historic significance of the buildings was debatable previously, but it's clear that they no longer retain the integrity needed to contribute meaningfully to the Wyman Historic District. Furthermore, when determining significance of the properties, the staff report overlooks the strategic importance of this area as highlighted in our city planning documents. This area of Colfax is designated as an area of change aimed at increasing density and improving transit connections. The $300 million investment in the Colfax BRT, including a new transit stop directly in front of our properties, underlines this vision. Here, replacing outdated structures with mixed income housing aligns perfectly with our community's growth and sustainability goals. Since purchasing these properties in November 2017, we have not stood idly by. During the last 7 years, we have invested millions of dollars above and beyond our acquisition cost. We face substantial challenges, including a major fire at 1600 Colfax, rendering it not only beyond repair, but also a safety hazard. This is supported by the unanimous agreement from our neighbors who recognize the imminent danger and support demolition. Our commitment to this neighborhood is unwavering. We have poured our resources, financial, physical, and emotional, into preserving what once stood here. Yet despite our extensive efforts, we've been continuously thwarted by circumstances beyond our control, leading us to a tough decision of seeking demolition. To conclude, I urge the commission to reconsider the historic value placed on these properties, to acknowledge our exhaustive and well-documented preservation efforts, and to recognize the broader community benefits that demolition and revisioning will bring. Demolishing these compromised structures will not only remove a public safety hazard, but also pave the way for a revitalized community space that offers much needed housing and enhances our public transit system. We seek your support to move forward with the demolition and ultimately build a project that aligns with shared goals for a thriving and dynamic Denver. Thank you for your time and your dedication to the city, obviously, and Lance is going to speak a little bit more about safety concerns.
Lance, your name and address, please.
Lance Cooch, 568 Fillmore Street, Denver, 80206. I am one of the principals of Pando Holdings, one of the owners of 1600, 1618 East Colfax Avenue. I'm here to address the urgent issue of public safety concerning these two buildings. These buildings, although they had decades of deferred maintenance when we acquired them, and while we deeply value Denver's history and have been committed to preserving these structures for the past 7 years as we work through the design review process, the situation has become untenable. Despite our best efforts to secure the site and the buildings, there has been a nonstop pattern of unauthorized individuals trespassing, breaking into the buildings, and camping. We frequently bring in the police to clear these buildings, bring a contractor back to the site to remediate, clean up, and re-secure it. Yet within weeks, the pattern begins anew. This persistent issue has grown into a significant public safety hazard that culminated with the fire on March 13th. The fire was unfortunately inevitable due to the deteriorating conditions of the buildings. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the fire has left the structure as a mere relic of what it once was. The condition of the 1618 building continues to deteriorate and will only grow more dangerous over time. Despite our diligent efforts to maintain the security of the site and the buildings, the degradation has been relentless. The fire and exposure to the elements have accelerated this decline. Another public safety issue is highly likely, especially given the current homeless situation in Denver. Both buildings are incredibly unsafe, as established by the photographs and the structural analysis by JBA in their report. In addition, we have received notice from the city in accordance with the 2022 Denver Building Code Section 105.1, the structures have been deemed unsafe. We are required to abate the unsafe structures by demolition and removal of all debris from the site, or alternatively by structurally reinforcing, repairing, and securing the buildings from the elements by 3 p.m. on Friday, June 29th, 2024. Building Department and JVA agree with us that these structures are ticking time bombs. I'll list off a few of the critical pressing public safety risks posed by these structures remaining in their current condition. 1/3 of the 1600 building must be removed due to the structural damage incurred by the fire. The remainder of the structure must be remediated from fire and water damage. Many of the structural elements replaced within that. The mechanical unit that sets atop 1600, the structure supporting that is virtually gone. It's a matter of time before that whole unit falls through the building. There's no longer a viable structure on the south-facing ground floor of the 1600 building to fasten plywood to re-secure that entrance and any of those window openings. So we're virtually open to the public. The two chimneys on the alley facing side of the 1608 building are structurally failing. And will eventually, when they do fall, due to the steep pitch of that roof, that falls directly into the public alley. The bricks on the southwest and southeast corners of the 1608 building are failing and literally falling out of the building, along with the roof of that building. It's failing. Regardless of how well or how often we secure the site, people continue to get in, leading to repeated safety breaches, which continues to put the police and firefighters, when we used to clear the buildings, at risk. Many of them, after this last fire, don't want to go in. This has drawn some of the worst conditions to this corner neighborhood since the fire. The ongoing deterioration means that key elements of the historic character are lost forever, and the building's enclosures continue to crumble. The alley and surrounding areas are at risk due to these. We have exhausted all measures to execute our plan of preserving these buildings, but at this point, demolition is necessary to ensure public safety. We urge the Landmark Preservation Committee to consider these points and grant us the ability to demolish these buildings. Preserving our history is important, but not at the expense of public safety. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Makes sense. Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicants?
Yeah.
George?
Between 2017 and the present, I heard a lot of safety hazards and endangerment and stuff like that. What did you do, let's say 2017 +1, to prevent deterioration, safety hazards, unauthorized entrance? Did you invest any funds in fencing, guards? Yes. Surveillance?
Yeah,
all that?
so I would say, leading up to COVID, we had 3 tenants that occupied the building, which were huge and keeping people out. So you had customers coming and going. We left that parking lot open at 1450 Franklin that we own for Octavio's restaurant. That kept people
Mhm.
coming and going. At that time, we did put up cameras. So we were notified anytime someone was on site after hours. Octavio, who owned that restaurant, did a tremendous job of keeping people out, right? Because he's operating that business. When COVID hit, all the business on Colfax shut down, shuttered. And that's when we began boarding up those locations. At that point, we also thought we were closer than we were in reality to getting approval and a building permit. But we had set expectations with Octavio. Hey, we're redeveloping this whole site, right? There's a 7-story apartment building that's going to get built behind this. These homes are getting redeveloped. A part of that redevelopment is removal of all of the environmental issues, right? So there was, the amount of pigeon activity in the 1618 building needed to be removed. Both buildings were full of asbestos. So at that time, Octavio found another space. He moved out. So we used that time to mobilize and bring in the abatement team, abated all of the asbestos and all structures. And then brought in CAM Services, a well-respected contractor in town, to board up the buildings. At that point, we put a perimeter fence around the entire site, kept our cameras with motion detectors on, wherein anyone that comes on site, we're notified via text message, a voice message sends a message to those that are trespassing to, you're trespassing, remove yourself, or we're calling the authorities. The police would be called. So anytime someone then broke into the buildings, we're bringing CAM Services, as I mentioned, they're coming back out. In many cases, there's so many people in there, they weren't comfortable, clearing them out. So we're bringing the police out, mobilize the police force, walk them through the building, get everyone out, get all their stuff out. bring CAM services back in to do a clean, because generally there's, part of that asbestos abatement, we then cut off all utilities to the building, right? So there's no water, there's no natural gas, no electrical, right? So, so I guess to answer your question. I feel
So
like
it sounds like you have quite a large amount of cost and effort in maintaining, the property that you had before you were able to figure out what you're gonna do with it, and then boom, you get something like COVID. So but you have a sunk investment in there.
yes.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question. Was there, did the fire department do an investigation as to what caused the fire? In other words, was there an arson investigation with some conclusions, or is that ongoing, or what's the status of how did the fire start? Who started it? And what its consequences were?
Yeah, so that investigation is still, I think, ongoing, but we've spoken to the arson investigator on site the day of the fire who, walked in and was able to determine the amount of, fire starter that was on that main floor. It looked like, a camping, people literally camping there. Through the camera on the First Bank building across the street, they saw people that jumped up onto the roof and walked across the front porch and breached our boarded up window above that deck and got in the building there. We're carrying, all kinds of gear to get in there.
No arrests or anything like that have been made.
No.
All right, anything else? Okay, great, gentlemen, thank you very much. All right. Would we like to go to public comment? Do you have an additional? Yeah. All right, so obviously we have, I'm sure that we have people here in person that would like to comment. That's terrific. We'll go with the people here in person first. You'll each get 3 minutes and we'll time it for you so you don't have to worry about it. And then we'll get to those of you joining us virtually. And I see we have 2 that already have their hands up, and that's great. For those of you listening to us virtually, you haven't done this before, you can click the hand raise button in your Zoom so that we'll know that you would like to speak. There you go, right there. Dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if joining by phone. And if you're having trouble with either of those, you can email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number if you're having difficulty. All right, so let's start in person. So what you'll do is you'll come up here and you give your name and address as part of your 3 minutes. Like I said, we'll keep track of it. Who wants to be first? Let's start with the gentleman here.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
Please, make something.
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Gassman. I'm the owner of the property at 1455 Gilpin Street. I've owned that property for 24 years, purchased in 2000. So I'm very familiar with these 2 properties and the going-ons at these properties prior to Pando's owning them, when Pando bought them, and the efforts to mitigate the homeless and all the issues that have been going on there. It's my belief that it would be in the best interest of everybody to demolish them and build back a better property to address some of the things that Kylie mentioned, more affordable housing, more units, and a better circumstance. Like I said, prior to Pando owning it, there was nothing that was done by the previous owners, and efforts were made prior to the Pando to develop it. And unfortunately, it was not cost effective to do so then. In better economic times, now the economic times are even more difficult. Like I said, all the contributing factors, it's my opinion that that would be in the best interest of the city as well as the surrounding neighbors and developers to demolish them and build back a better property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next. Jill? Name and address, please.
My name's Brad Cameron. I live at 1200 Humboldt, which is a little over 3 blocks away from this address. I'm also president of Neighbors for Greater Capitol Hill, which is a registered neighborhood organization whose boundaries include this property. Last week, the Board of Neighbors voted unanimously, but reluctantly, to support demolition, and a letter to that effect was sent in and I believe was shared with all of you. I'm not going to repeat the points in the letter, but I've got a couple of things I'd like to emphasize. First, just to repeat what's been said, these buildings were in absolutely terrible condition prior to Panville purchasing them. They were owned before by some slumlords and they ran them into the ground and they were in terrible, terrible condition. Second, Pando put forth a very excellent redevelopment plan, not without some prodding by neighbors. And that plan proposed to fully protect and restore the contributing structures, and it was endorsed by the neighborhood. We loved it. Third, in my opinion, Pando took appropriate measures to secure the buildings and while awaiting restoration. If they had not, in my opinion, my position here would be different. But I live close by and go by it often, and I think they really did try to keep the building secure. But alas, Denver in general and Colfax in particular is a very hostile environment for vacant buildings. It's a really tough time out there, and it's a great concern for any building that's left vacant. Brings us to today. The engineering report submitted by Pando certainly documents the extensive destruction of the fire, and having personally witnessed it and seen the property afterwards, it's really apparent that there's a lot of damage. And obviously the city agrees in the sense of issuing the demolition and repair permit. Sometimes circumstances are such that it's necessary to let go of the past and to move forward. This is one of those times. Denver's landmark preservation program needs to be flexible enough to accommodate the loss of these buildings. Let's face it, we're not dealing with Notre Dame Cathedral or even the 16th Street Masonic Temple, both examples of buildings that can be brought back from fires. Instead, these are contributing structures. They're important, but their time is gone. Some mention's been made of precedent, but precedent cuts both ways. What type of message does it send to those who want to invest in questionable historic structures if, when faced with a catastrophe such as this, they have to pour even more valuable money into it? So it's time to let these buildings go. Thank you.
Right now, 3 minutes. Well done, sir. Thank you very much. Next.
Sure. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Van Scholes. I live at 1447 North Gilpin Street, across the alley from these properties. And I've lived in that historic house for 22 years. And thank you. And I've run, and some of my renovations have come before this commission. And I thank you for your support of all of the history of Denver and our beautiful structures. I love the energy of Colfax, and I love my neighborhood, and I love my block. Having said that, these buildings need to go. Ever since I've lived at this address, there has been problems at this property, even when there were tenants. They've been neglected. I'm a regular caller of 311 and 911. The number of crimes that have taken place because of these properties not being developed is off the charts. You could talk to the Denver police or anybody else that lives in this neighborhood. It's the epicenter of crime on our block. I'm here, I want to strongly support you guys, even though I get it, that it's difficult and we need to protect historic buildings. I live in an 1889 Queen Anne Victorian. I love my house. I'm grateful that the previous owners brought it back to life and I continue to do so. but these buildings are not that. We need more housing in Denver. We need to redesign the city to address the needs of 2024 and beyond. Pando has been very effective at working with neighbors like me and responding to concerns around the design. Their earlier designs, as was shared already, were actually beautiful given the enormous constraints put on them by having to protect those buildings, which I thought was ridiculous. But in any case, we're now in a situation where they can't move forward without getting rid of them, and the city believes that they should be torn down, as I do, as a neighbor who believes strongly in historic preservation. So I strongly support them, and I hope that you guys will do the right thing and acknowledge that the whole context for the neighborhood has changed since 1958. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next. Jen.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Sorensen. I've lived in the Cheeseman Park area since 1976. Over that time, I have seen many changes throughout Capitol Hill, and I've always wanted to maintain the historic feel of our neighborhoods. I am a preservationist at heart. However, the unsound structural condition of the buildings at 1600 and 1618 East Colfax makes them nearly impossible to restore, particularly after the disastrous fire on March 13th at 1600 Colfax. The JVA engineering report attests to this fact. My greatest fear is that if the permit to demolish these structures is denied, the current owners will not be financially able to rehabilitate them, and they will continue to sit vacant for an indeterminate period, adversely affecting the neighborhood. It would be better to allow these buildings to be demolished and a new structure to be built, one that would honor the historic character and create a new landmark on the significant corner at the start and end of Park Avenue. We cannot allow these structures in their current condition to continue to be a blight on our neighborhood. Thank you. And my address is 1250 Humboldt Street.
Thank you very much, sir. All right.
Letters that I support.
As
Okay,
well,
thanks.
so, but thank you for printing them.
Sure, no problem. Hi, just gonna pull up my notes here. My name is Frank Locantore, and I am the Executive Director of the Colfax Ave Business Improvement District. I live at 2145 East 16th Avenue, which is exactly 7 blocks from the properties that we're discussing. The board of the Business Improvement District has taken a position in support of demolition. And the letter here, I won't repeat, but fortuitously, we've been in the process of a strategic plan in which we did a survey of the community with over 500 responses, and some relevant responses to that survey were between 82 and 95% of the Colfax community really want to see infill development, vacant lots developed, and vacant storefronts occupied. And these properties, I'm also a former tenant for a short period of time in the properties, and was helping with the snow shoveling and calling when there were issues that were happening. And our team, we have just a small team of 3 and a maintenance company that are on the street 365 days a year. And we are constantly seeing people breaking through the fence, climbing up onto the buildings, pulling off the boards. And so what we do is we contact the folks over at Pando and 311 and 911, depending upon the situation, and report these over and over and over and over again, despite new boards going up and being taken down. It's the issue of Colfax, where somebody says, here, I'm gonna build this thing that's gonna be bomb proof. And then Colfax says, hold my beer. So we are, obviously, there is a mandate to preserve as much as possible, and if we were talking about the buildings from years ago, that would be great. We're not, we're talking about a context today in 2024 that is so very different. And clearly you have an opportunity and a responsibility to be able to weigh these various circumstances that may result in saying, this is enough, and this is the limit. We can't allow first responders to go into these buildings anymore. We need them to be safer. So I respectfully submit that we support the demolition permit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here in person? Yes, please. Have a seat, your name and address.
My name is Andy Baldiga, 1540 Race Street. I'm an architect in the city as well. Been a resident of the Wyman Historic District for about 20 years. Lived in various places, worked with the Colfax Business Improvement District, and this site has been under discussion for decades, as many people have said previously. This, to say a couple of different things, I think, one, I love the neighborhood and loved the plan that Pando brought forward. Was hopeful, there was actually excitement that that would happen. Unfortunately, you know, as you heard, things were difficult and it's not gonna be possible, but that's okay. I mean, I'm comfortable with it, one, because the district as a whole is quite large. You know, we have a great neighborhood that is very well preserved. However, that does limit the options for development in the area. We have some great density by Cheeseman Park that's been there for a while. But as far as new infill, it's quite difficult to introduce new development. When the hospitals left, a lot of those buildings that were occupied by dentists and other office spaces, they have become larger. They've reverted back to single family. What that's done is created some pretty unaffordable housing. I mean, those are very large homes and they're beautiful, but they are they're out of reach of many folks in the neighborhood. Our neighborhood could use additional density, additional housing, and this intersection is actually a great location for it. We've got millions of dollars coming into the BRT system on Colfax. There's already quite a bit of density nearby, some that Pando actually helped introduce years prior that provided new housing options. Freeing up allowing the demolition of these properties on this site will help provide hopefully future housing options in the whole district. And I think that'll actually support the district as a whole. We've got it's it's not to say that, you know, there have been some wins. You know, this can be viewed as a negative, but looking up and down the street, I look at Tom's Diner that's been preserved. That's a great element, historic element in the neighborhood. The church in the city at 16th and Gaylord has, you know, been renovated in the time I've lived there. The facade of the Colorado Coalition Homeless Building on Pearl and Colfax was renovated. And then the corner at Colfax and York has three buildings that are in quite good shape and making their way into the future and in a positive manner. And one of those is very similar to the one here that has a house and a retail space on front. So I encourage you to support the demolition of these structures to help usher the Wyman District, Colfax
Sir, yeah, you're 3 minutes
into the
left.
future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Anybody else there? I see a hand. I can't see a face, but I can see a hand. Oh, hi, Keith. Name and address, please.
Sure. Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street. I am the chair of the Curtis Park and the Wellness Street Historic Design Districts, representing myself today. On your consent agenda today, you had 801 and 803 29th Street, which has a complete collapse of a back wall that is being rebuilt that you did approve. And you also have 2115 Glenarm Street, which is another derelict property that is on today's consent agenda that actually was then incorporated into a larger mixed-use project on that block. The neighbors obviously know, and I'm definitely in support of those that are locally and actually deal with this situation. it is a very sad situation that this has taken 7 years and we still have not had development on this site. Obviously, there's something wrong with the process in the city. If we're not able to get development, which is desperately needed to occur on a site, that we're not able to create a safe environment for our neighbors on that block. And so obviously there are some significant underlying issues that are going on within our city and our planning and our actual permitting process. But obviously there are examples out there that we've had successes, as Tom Diner and others were mentioned. And these two that were on your consent agenda. So it is a very difficult thing for you to decide today. Weighing in the safety issues versus telling a story of what Colfax is and how Colfax has evolved. So obviously there are points that have been stated by the neighbors of what they're dealing with and the situation and the existing conditions on these. But we have had precedent to where we've been able to make this work as well. What does this say going forward when we do have structures that continually being neglected? How do we deal with this neglect situation and getting our histories preserved more effectively than what we've allowed with these two buildings? So I look forward to your deliberations and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Anybody else in person? All right, I don't see any hands. Thanks, everybody. So those of you joining us virtually, let's start at the top. Scott, let's bring him up. Well, Scott, can you hear us? We've had this discussion. I'm an Aries, so I don't like to wait.
I took a second on the audio. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, hi, Scott. You'll have 3 minutes and we'll time it for you. If you could start the 3 minutes with your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Scott McAllister. I'm at 1112 Marion Street, so just a handful of blocks from the site we're discussing. I'm showing up today as a neighbor first, a concerned citizen second, and a father of 2 young girls. I want to thank my neighbors for stepping up and contributing their voice to the process. Anyone that's seen this building over the years has had concerns, but since the fire, it is almost impossible to argue this thing hasn't lost its historical context, and it no longer contributes to the neighborhood. In fact, it is a huge detractor. And while I know change is hard, and I am moved to this part of town because of the preservation of the historic buildings, this thing has to go. And first and foremost, I'm most concerned for the safety of our citizens, the safety of our first responders, who I know are in and out of that building on a far too frequent basis. And to be honest, the safety of my own kids. We bike down that street all the time, and they've now expressed concern wanting to leave the neighborhood because that building still is allowed to exist. And so, if not now, what does it take to get this thing taken care of? What message does it send to the market, to other developers that are trying to improve the opportunities on the Colfax Business District? I don't know what else has to happen, who else has to be involved, who has to die before we're willing to take action on this. But this feels like it's well past the verge of common sense. It's not just necessary, but it's the only responsible option. We've heard from a number of groups that are supportive of this. I just want to echo their support. We've got developers that have a strong track record of improving the neighborhoods they invest in. I don't know why in the world we would stand in the way of progress here, especially given the state of affairs. I can understand wanting to preserve what was. If you look at this building and if you're willing to put the pictures back up of the inside and the outside, it is impossible for me to see a path for this to be part of town that I'm proud to show my kids. And so I'd ask for your willingness to reconsider here, to look at what's possible for the neighborhood as we look into the future. I want to be a longtime resident in this part of town, but if we're not able to get past these kinds of obvious decisions, it's going to force me and my family to reconsider our decisions. And so I just want to really thank the committee for the willingness to go through this process, to really listen to the people that are most closely affected. I don't know if you have to drive by this thing every single day to get to your work like I do. But it's an eyesore. It's something that anytime someone comes to visit me from out of town, I work hard to avoid showing them this specific block because of what's gone on here. And so, again, I'd like to go back to this feels like not just necessary, but the only responsible decision, first and foremost, for the safety of our residents, the safety of our first responders, and if nothing else, the safety of my 2 girls. And so thank you for hearing me out today, and really hope we're able to come to a positive outcome here.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, next.
John Duffin.
John? Right. Hi, John. Hi, John, can you hear us? Is it?
Coming on.
Hi, sorry
There
about
you
that.
are. That's okay.
Oh,
Name and, yeah, name and address, please.
Sure. My name is John Deffenbaugh with Historic Denver at 1420 Ogden Street. Commissioners, thank you so much for the time to speak. We appreciate this is a very difficult conversation, and we completely respect the views of the neighbors which have been expressed so eloquently so far, completely understand where they are coming from. Nevertheless, Historic Denver and our board of directors opposes this demolition application. We've had conversations with Lance Goltz. We understand the position he is in. We have sympathy with the position he's in. We understand the issues of crime and public safety in the area. Nevertheless, these are historic buildings. They're in a historic district. They're character contributing buildings within that historic district. And 1600 Colfax in particular is notable for being the final home of George Williamson, who designed, amongst many other things, in Denver East High School. I've been in this job for almost a year. And my observation is that many people are in favor of building preservation until it gets tough. And then instead of the tough getting going, they seek a demolition permit. And that's just what's happening here. These are important buildings. Public safety is a misnomer. Tom's Diner was brought up earlier as a building which is an example of a win. I'd argue that Tom's Diner is an example of a building which is securely safeguarded while it's empty right now. Unfortunately, we all know it's empty. We are hopeful there will be a new concept in it this summer, but for now it's unoccupied, as these buildings have been for a period of time too. At Tom's Diner, the lights are on. Someone visits there at least once a day. Its fence is very secure. It's a very different experience to what was the case around these buildings. So one of the speakers earlier who was in favor of demolition, he himself said, this is a situation of neglect. These buildings have been neglected, and this is seeking demolition through neglect. So we would urge commissioners to safeguard these buildings in line with their historic status and deny this application. Thank you so much.
John, thank you. All right, next.
Ryan, you should be able to unmute yourself here shortly and turn on your video if you'd like. That's up to you.
There's Ryan.
Hello.
Hi, Ryan. Yeah,
Hi.
name and address, please, and then you'll get 3 minutes to make your comment.
My name is Ryan Keeney. I live at 800 North Pennsylvania Street, in the same neighborhood, well, adjacent neighborhood of this building in Capitol Hill. I'm the president of YIMBY Denver, and I also sit on the Chun board, although the latter org has not yet taken a position on this. Yeah, one of the reasons I live in Capitol Hill is because I really enjoy the history, seeing buildings that provide a connection to the past. I grew up in a 1990s subdivision built on a cornfield. And so I really do like having buildings of diverse ages, some going back to, near the beginning of the founding of the city, because yeah, it is a really amazing, connection to the past. But I think this particular building has seen its day. I agree with most of the other commenters here that this building is now like a liability for the city. I think it has questionable historic value, especially considering the fire that has happened. And I think honestly that if we are able to develop this lot, this is going to get more people living on Colfax, and this is going to get more stakeholders on Colfax. This is going to drive more customers and more business opportunities towards other historic buildings that are on Colfax that are currently vacant or under threat of becoming vacant and potentially being lost like this one. And so if the more investment we can get on Colfax and the more people we can get into the neighborhood, I think that would actually further the mission of historic preservation and of this commission. So yes, it's regrettable what's happened to these buildings. I remember the whole process going back at least to 2019, which is the first presentation I saw on this, and I was thrilled with that concept. But just unfortunately, that can't happen anymore due to economic conditions. And so I think for all the reasons I articulated, it's time for this lot to go, or for these buildings to go, to make way for some revitalization on the street to help maybe perhaps save other historic buildings. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ryan. Okay, next.
And lastly, Michael Henry, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera here shortly.
Michael, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, I can hear you. Can you
Oh, there
hear
you
me?
go. Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. Yep. Name and address, please, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment.
My name is Michael Henry. I live at 1201 North William Street, which is about 2 blocks away from the property in question. I did witness the smoke coming from the fire back in March. I'm also, along with Brad Cameron, a board member of Neighbors for Greater Capitol Hill. When I used to be with Capitol Hill United Neighborhoods, I was one of the persons who helped draft the application for the Wyman Historic District. What nobody has yet mentioned is that this intersection is a very visibly prominent view from along Colfax and along Park Avenue. It's been a physical disaster from an aesthetic point of view for the last several years. We have had numerous meetings with Pando Holdings since they acquired it in 2017. And they have worked very hard, as a number of the speakers have said, to work with the neighborhood and with the Landmark Commission. And some of you undoubtedly recall that the commission approved a proposed new building in the parking lot to the south. I was very disappointed that the staff report in this case did not seriously think about the economic hardship of this particular situation posed for the owner. Some of you may recall many, many years ago, there was a sort of a similar case in Northwest Denver, the Bosler House, where that owner deliberately allowed the building to deteriorate. And that is the definition of demolition by neglect. But that is not the case here. And I'd encourage you to approve the
Sir, your 3 minutes is up.
demolition.
Your 3 minutes is up, sir. Thank you very much. All right, is there anybody else there? And one more pass on the group before we move on. Nobody else? Okay, great. Staff, do you have any additions?
Much follow-up.
Okay, all right.
So in this Staff has reviewed the Winter and Company assessment. It was done back in 2018. Staff respectfully disagrees with Winter and Company's assessment on the integrity of the properties, and you have our integrity and assessment in front of you today to review and determine as the commission collectively if you feel similarly or differently. So I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of the map that is included in your staff report, this was part of the application for designation. It was not formally adopted with the ordinance. The ordinance just states a period of significance, which is prior to and including 1955. Which this structure and this addition are within, and generally speaking, when a structure is within the period of significance is classified as contributing. Again, we have provided the definition of contributing in our staff report and how we feel that this structure meets that definition of contributing as well. The city has issued a unsafe notice for this property in March following the fire. And it is a wreck and repair order. And they do have certain deadlines that they are required, wreck or repair order, that they're required to meet. We have met internally as staff, and if the applicant wanted to propose rehabilitation, we'd be willing to take steps to set up a timeline to ensure rehabilitation could be achieved, very much similar to several of the NAD properties and the timelines and processes they go through. However, the applicant has decided to pursue the demolition, which is an option through that order. I do know that the fire damage was pretty significant in this property because the fire department did not feel comfortable entering this property. The properties have been on the NADB list since 2020 because they are vacant properties. So it's vacant and derelict buildings. These were placed on that list because they're vacant. Generally speaking, though, they've been in compliance with keeping the properties boarded and secure as much as they physically can. In November of 2023, 1600 East Colfax did have an order for their fence being down, but it was rectified within the same month. But otherwise, complaints on these properties are generally speaking about weeds, graffiti, etc. And every time the city has gone out to inspect, they've found them to be in compliance with what is required of a vacant and derelict building. And then finally, I just want to touch on, we did not look at the economics of these properties in this particular application because that is a separate process through us called the economic hardship process. And it can only be applied for after the commission has reviewed a demolition request. The applicants and property owners are aware of the steps for that. So if the commission does deny this request for demolition today, they have 30 days to apply for economic hardship. And then that's when we would look at the specifics regarding the economics to preserve and restore these specific properties. So today, staff was focusing on whether or not these properties were contributing to the Wyman Historic District and whether we felt that they retained their integrity. And based on the landmark ordinance's definitions of integrity, we do find, generally speaking, that they do retain their integrity. However, as we stated in the staff report, the workmanship and materials is in a severe state of neglect. Most of that, again, wasn't caused by Pando Holdings, who have been working on rehabilitating these properties. They do have their site development plan approved for rehabilitation and the new 7-story building. However, it's still going through the permitting process and they have no permits issued on that work as of yet. So that's where we stand today in terms of what happened when the fire occurred in March.
Okay. Commissioners, questions?
I have a question. If we grant approval for the request for demo, they still can't demo the building until an approved replacement plan is in place.
That is correct. So the ordinance specifically states the demolition approval shall require a replacement structure or site plan. It doesn't necessarily mean a structure. It is intended to avoid vacant parking lots and vacant lots in historic districts, but it does state structure or site plan in the ordinance.
So that means they would probably not be able to actually demo the buildings for quite some time, which means that stabilization of the buildings to meet the fire department requirements is going to be necessary in any case. Is that a correct understanding of how this works? They won't be able to demolish the buildings until an approved replacement plan, whether it's a site plan or redevelopment plan, which is going to take some time.
Yeah, I mean, we can't speak to what that proposed replacement plan is. The first step for the applicant in this process was to seek demolition. They are on a very tight timeline for their wreck and repair order. However, whatever comes out of this commission hearing today, we would work internally with the city and the applicants on next steps.
Other questions for Brittany? Larry, you're thinking.
Oh, no, I think I
Please
just.
talk. I know.
I just had in mind a different process where, somebody is proposing to demolish a property and then there's a request to land market and that goes to the city council, but in this case, it wouldn't. I guess that's correct, right?
It is already landmarked, so the decision lies squarely on you as the Landmark Preservation Commission today. And then again, if it's denied, the request to appeal is through the economic hardship process, which is reviewed by you as the commission, also through a public hearing process.
I've got another question. Can approval be conditioned in such a way that restricts the development of the vacant portion of the site to a degree less than what current zoning is allowed?
Well, we can always be more restrictive than current zoning. However, they do have a approval for a 7-story structure on that site. Any replacement plan, because this is within the Wyman Historic District, is subject to review and approval by the commission. Again, I don't know if the applicants are planning to redevelop the site in a different way, based on the fact that we have these conditions that have occurred. So I can't really speak to that right now, but they do have a valid approval, and in theory, they could, if they got permits, tomorrow, they could start construction on that 7-story tower that is there. But I can't speak for
But that approved development plan included the rehabilitation of the existing buildings.
it does, but if they could put in for an SUP amendment that would include demolition. Again, I don't know exactly what their steps are for if this is approved for demolition.
Okay, so I have a question. So our charge as a commission is to review the historic integrity.
So the ordinance states that the findings of the commission shall be based on considerations of specified design, standards, presented plans, public testimony, and related findings of fact. That's specifically what the ordinance states.
So the economics and the safety, not necessarily our purview, or?
Economic isn't.
Yeah, the economics at this time wouldn't be, because that would be part of the economic hardship, and there's
Right.
several documents. I think you should look at it based on the design guidelines in consideration of the integrity and the public testimony you've heard today.
Which is mostly about safety.
And we did separate these two properties out for very specific reasons.
All right,
So
okay, well, So commissioners, anything else for Brittany? And let us go into deliberation. We'll close the public hearing. And we will go into deliberation now. So commissioners.
Okay, well, we're going to go. First of all, right at the top, I support the staff and their assessment of the property as it meets the guidelines. In its time and construction style and all of the requirements. I'm curious and a little concerned about if this project was started in 2017, why weren't the people evicted and the projects actually begun when I think it was allowed to become more derelict than it was when they bought it. For reasons I tried to find out, but I don't know. The fact that asbestos has been mitigated, I think it's great, and that indicates, at least to me, that they mean what they say and that they're going to do it. However, again, the guidelines does not include financial implications, nor does it include some kind of mandate for affordable housing or any of that. Those are all very nice things, but that's not, as Landmark Commission, what we are here to do. So, and I think the redevelopment, even if it was demolished, is still going to cost a huge amount. So I don't think the financial dog will hunt very well. I'm going to support staff and not support demolition of property.
All right, thanks, George.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off by saying that, I think it's important to focus that this was part of the Wyman Historic Designation. And I don't think we are in a position to question its designation as we were kind of invited to do at the outset. One, I will note that, this type of building with a residence with commercial addition is a special use type that's recognized by History Colorado, the State Historic Preservation Office, as something that, reflects a community's development. I think that's certainly the case here. Hearing George speak about reasons why this happened or kind of economics behind it kind of clarifies to me that we are not in a position at this moment to weigh in on any of that. That what we can weigh in on is the integrity of this building and how what they are proposing to do meets the guidelines. And in that case, I think the staff made it a very clear argument for us to follow, which would be to deny this, because I do agree that the integrity of the building remains. Condition, while neglectful condition or deteriorating condition threatens integrity by loss of materials or workmanship, it is not the same as loss of integrity. So, again, we are tasked with looking at integrity. I think the building as it is, it's a terrible loss to see the damage that was done, but I still believe that it retains enough integrity to convey its significance for what it was designated for as a contributing building to the Wyman Historic District. And then as far as the guidelines go, taking all measures required to repair and retain a contributing landmark, I think it's clear that we need to see such a plan in front of us to understand that that is being pursued before we can write it off. So with all of that, I would support staff's recommendation to deny.
Yeah, thank you.
I couldn't possibly put it more articulately than my colleague Erica just did, but I too support staff.
Yeah, I also would support, I agree with my colleagues and staff, and I also wanna just bring up the structural engineering report, which all it does indicate significant amounts of damage. Also, shows percentages of things being intact up to the level 3 floor, saying it's 66% intact structurally, which to me agrees with the staff report indicating that from a historic preservation standpoint, that integrity is very much there.
Larry, thank you.
Can I ask Larry a question?
I don't know, why not?
Yeah.
Well, it's up to Larry.
Yes, I
As the
grant you the-
as the non-architect, have you
Yes.
seen engineering reports that said, this thing's a total loss, you're dumb if you even do anything other than scrape it? Do engineers say that, or, but all I saw was 50%?
Yeah, I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
For example, there was one, I think, in Alamo Placida where the tree
Yeah.
had fallen down and, significantly damaged the brick walls to the point where they would essentially have to be completely rebuilt.
Mhm.
And so if I were seeing, something of that nature in this structural report, that would weigh differently to me.
Yeah, because I didn't see anything that said like, the only thing I saw was 50% of something was damaged. I didn't see the foundation was heaved or, the thing was gonna collapse, so.
Okay.
Just trying to
Graham and
educate myself.
Barry, we have.
Well, when I first read the staff report, I was in support of it. Because this is demolition by neglect. I understand now, after hearing the testimony, that, there were substantial efforts to protect the building. I don't think that changes my mind because of the potential of, there's a couple of issues. One is history is important to preserve. And these are the only two structures like it that are currently protected, even though there are other structures like it, they're not protected. And so how would redevelopment of this site without these buildings occur in such a way that the history of Colfax is somehow interpreted and put forward, I also am struggling with the fact that with demolition of these buildings, it's a CMX 8. If there's more than a certain percentage of affordable housing, they could go 12 stories. It's a whole different, scenario. It is a difficult question. I think the owner needs to go through the hardship analysis in this case, because I don't see how we could say, oh, well, development's better than protecting this piece of Colfax's history.
Yeah.
Without seeing what that might be.
It's fairly narrow.
Yeah.
Graham, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot that I could add. It's new. Many years ago, in fact, after the applicants bought the building, Spectrum, my company, looked at it, did some of the very early cleanup work. At the time, I was in the buildings, familiar with the insides. I know that all that to be said, we've been involved in years. So, this is distant at that point, but familiar. JVA, we've called for other reports when we've had a question about whether an engineer has had historic experience. I can say from experience that JVA is probably one of the most experienced preservation engineers in Colorado. So I think that, their assessment carries a lot of weight for me by virtue of that experience as well. And, it was a daunting project in 2017. And that obviously hasn't changed, and that's the spirit of JVA's letter as well, right? I understand the cost and the effort involved and how that's only gotten more challenging in the last 5 or 6 years. So Gary, to your point, I think that if a hardship analysis was complete, that would be a very different conversation than we're having today. I don't disagree with the history and the unique development here. It's Colfax is a busy street. It's pretty uncommon to have 3 sequential pictures even showing that development, right? Which we saw in the early presentation for the project that's approved, which is a long ways through the permitting process at this point, it looks like. So again, without adding anything new to that, just to reinforce that this is a really difficult decision. I think that the economics of it, if it does indeed come back through the hardship process, will probably be a different conversation than we're having today. But for the purposes of today's conversation, the history, the fact that the buildings haven't changed since designated, since purchased in shape, and, you know, important layers of retail weren't removed, things like that, right, as Erica said. It's hard to agree, but it's hard to disagree. Is that fair to say?
Right, it's fair.
And so I, you know, again, that maybe only muddies the waters here in our deliberation, but everyone just spoke very clear where they stand today.
Our mission here today is fairly narrow, so. And yes, JVA has told me to tear something down, so for the record. All right, then, commissioners, do I hear a motion from the floor? Erica.
I move to deny application number 2024 LMDEMO -097 for the total demolition of 1600 East Colfax Avenue as per chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code, Design Guideline 2.58. Character defining features for the Wyman Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Do I hear a second? Second. Gary has seconded it. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right, then it has passed unanimously that the demolition has been denied. Correct. All right, so now we are on to 2024 dash LM. Oh, I have to open public hearing again. Opening public hearing on 2024 LMDEMO 098 at 1618 East Colfax Avenue in the Wyman District. And Brittany is our staff person.
So this is the adjacent property at 1618 East Colfax Avenue. It's also known as 1608 East Colfax Avenue. The historic mansion was constructed between 1893 and 1895. However, the storefronts here are slightly different time period. The earliest storefront addition to these properties was this structure here, which you can see in historic photos. However, this storefront was added in the 1950s, so still within the period of significance. I won't repeat a lot of the history of the neighborhood and the widening of the street, but I will focus on some key factors relating to this specific structure. So again, these properties were assessed by JVA initially when Panda Holdings purchased these properties in 2022. This structure was found to have a significant amount of water damage that the adjacent property was not to have found. When JVA came back out again relating to the fire at 1618, which this property was not affected by that fire, JVA found that the conditions were much the same. Again, this one did have significant amount of water damage when it was assessed at the time. So the applicant again is proposing total demolition of this structure, which the commission can evaluate based on consideration of specific design standards, presented plans, public testimony, and related findings of fact. Again, we did evaluate this property based on whether or not it was considered contributing to the Wyman Historic District. The definition for contributing is defined in the ordinance, which means a structure or feature that adds to the historic, architectural, geographic, or cultural significance of the district. 1618 East Colfax is a contributing structure. It was identified as contributing in a map included with the application for designation. As previously stated, that was part of the designation, but not officially adopted as part of the ordinance. The historic mansion in 1950s storefront addition were constructed within the district's period of significance, which again is prior to and including 1955. And we feel that the structure contributes to our understanding of the historic development of the Colfax corridor as it portrays a distinctive architectural style, in this case, Edwardian revival with the 1950s commercial storefronts, and is part of a distinctive area of Denver, which is the Wyman addition to Denver. We did also assess the integrity of this structure. Again, there are 7 qualities of integrity. For this specific property, the location again remains the same, and the additions are in the original location. The setting of this property is very similar to the last, where while the historic lawn is no longer intact, they are representational of East Colfax shift from a residential area to a commercial corridor. In terms of design, the Edwardian revival style of the historic mansion is apparent, and there is more architectural detailing remaining on this structure. You can see portions of the original front porch on this one in a way that you cannot on the 1618 property. The 1950s storefront additions do exhibit a significant amount of change to the cladding materials and storefront proportions, so we're not as convinced that the design integrity of the additions remains intact, but for the mansion, they are intact. In terms of materials, again, you can see the original construction, brick construction, again, in poor condition due to years of neglect. The wood shingles on this structure are in need of repair, and the windows on this structure are also in need of replacement. The 1950s storefronts were originally constructed of brick, but have been reskinned throughout the years. So the additions may lack integrity. In terms of workmanship, you can see circular windows, leaded glass, and classical detailing on the historic mansion. But the workmanship of the addition is probably not as strong. However, I would say in terms of feeling, no significant changes have been made to 1618 East Colfax and its addition since the 1993 designation of the Wyman Historic District, in which these were identified as contributing. That would negate the aesthetic or historic sense of these structures as contributing. And then finally, Association 1618 again has a direct link to development of the East Colfax from a residential street to a commercial corridor. Again, these are the only two mansion structures with storefront additions along Colfax that are flagged for preservation currently. So staff finds that the structure maintains integrity and all qualities of integrity, with material and workmanship in need of attention due to several years of neglect. Again, the storefront additions may lack integrity as they exhibit changes to design and materials that have occurred outside of the period of significance, but the storefront forms were in place at the time of the designation. So I just have some additional photos of this property as well, that you can see the condition that it is in. It is a beige brick. The painting on the structure is due to graffiti orders that the city, this is how they mitigate graffiti, is they simply paint over it. Here you can see the addition that is brick, but the front facade has been reskinned and reclad. Here you can see some of those photos from the condition report from JVA that show that the materials are in need of attention. And then again, just those same historic photos. And you can see that first addition to the property, which was brick, and you can see the changes that have occurred over time with the recladding and reskinning of those additions. And then you just have a partial view of 1618 East Colfax. So staff are recommending denial of this request to demolish as well, as this is a contributing structure to the Wyman Historic District. And again, our guidelines state do not demolish contributing buildings and to take all measures required to retain and repair contributing structures.
All right, commissioners, do you have questions for staff? Another one? Okay, great. All right, our applicant, would the applicant like to come up and
I think we've said what we needed to say.
say what okay?
And also, like, for public comment, if you want to speak again, feel free, but if you don't have anything additional to add. But if you don't want to present, Kylie, we'll move into public comment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think that a process where you're supposed to consider public comment and nobody mentioned that
unanimous from the public comment that to in support of demolition. So I guess that's a little bit surprising and none of you actually mentioned it, and I think should be part of your duty, protect the neighborhood, so I guess that's all I have to say.
Well,
Commissioners, do you have any questions? for
yeah,
Gary?
so now that we're back to this, I do have questions that I probably should have asked when you first presented. But I'm gonna take this opportunity to ask because I had a chance to, I'm new to the commission. And I wasn't involved in any of the previous discussions regarding the redevelopment of this site. But I did take the opportunity to go to your website and look at the renderings relative to what was proposed. And I just wonder if you could talk for a minute about what the building program was proposed to be. Because it looks to me like it's maybe a one-phase or a two-phase project, but certainly segregated by use types. So you had a high-rise or mid-rise residential building, and you were preserving the two buildings on the front of Colfax, the front Colfax. And so with that understanding or explanation, what did the fire change about that pro forma? Did you have insurance on the building? No, it was not insured.
There was nothing to insure.
Well, that. Okay, well, it'll be, I guess then we're gonna get to the hardship at some point. But it seems to me, you know, from a developer standpoint, and this is just a friendly comment, that that you're using the fire as a play for yield on the site. And
No, I mean, I think there's no way we would have spent the amount of money. We have building permits with the best architect in the whole city. There's no way we would have done that trying to make a play for the land. No way. It'd be insane.
well, what made sense years ago doesn't make sense today, given the increase in construction costs, increase in interest rates. And so it's not, you know, we're not here to compensate for what the market's doing.
No, of course not.
Us
Us not, we're not either.
So anyway, so I guess that answers my question is, you know, what has changed given the fire is you didn't have insurance on the existing structures, and so you have to rebuild them.
It's just more
as
money.
part
It's
of-
just more money.
Right.
If we're talking about, it's probably increased the cost 50% on just those two buildings. You know, and it went from, bring up money, it went from us thinking, we'll put $1 million into these buildings, we'll fix them up, we'll reuse them, we'll put our office in there, to it being a $6 million number, to it being an $8 million number.
So it sounds like
So
we're gonna
this is
ultimately
before,
get to that.
before the fire. That was before the fire. So now we have the fire. And, you know, we're kind of at our wit's end, honestly. And we hear it from our neighbors. We hear it from the police when they have to come and clear these buildings. You know, thank God nobody died in the fire, but I don't know how long these buildings are gonna sit like this. And it's only a matter of time before 1618. I mean, what can we do? We can't you cannot keep people out of these buildings.
Yeah, so there's risk in everything. And it was probably priced into your deal to begin with. And things change. And so just so I guess, I mean, I'm gonna have an open mind when it comes time, if this gets denied. I'm gonna have an open mind if the appeal process is taken to claim economic hardship, and I'll be interested in hearing that full story.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback that, it's, you know, you think about the time it takes to get a building permit, right? You know, something you guys could be involved in that would help the city. would be if you're gonna encourage local developers like us to do projects like this ever again, help them get to the front of the line. They shouldn't
You
be at-
can't put
they shouldn't
that
be at the
on this
back of the
body
line.
in that way. I understand your right to say that, but I'm gonna defend this body by saying that we're not here to be the path of least resistance for.
Oh, no, no, we know that. But I also think just taking into account the public and what's important to them should be more important to your mission.
Then our
as being-
guidelines? I mean,
Well,
that's
it's
our
part of the
mission.
guidelines, I'm pretty sure,
That's
but
our
she said
mission.
the public comment should be something that you guys.
So I mean, I don't think this is,
not constructive.
yeah, this is not intended to be a back and forth argument.
I'm sorry.
If you would like, you still have a fair amount of time to present additional on this specific building if you like. But if not, we're gonna continue on with additional commission questions and then move into public.
I do appreciate how difficult this is. And I'm not trying to be totally argumentative, we're trying to figure out a path forward.
Commissioners, any other questions for our applicants?
Given the status of where you're at in the building permit process, which is a long ways through it, you know, if a permit was issued, prepared to begin construction, if there hadn't been a fire, is that something that, granted that that's just a contextual question here,
You know, we're still probably a year out on getting a building permit, to be honest. I mean, we've got SDP
Yep.
pending. Now we get to, have our building permit analyzed. To say we were ready to pull a building permit, if it was today, I mean, the lending environment is entirely different today than it was certainly when we met.
years ago, right? No, I was just curious, haven't known that that's been a long process.
And I guess just to piggyback that, I mean, give what has changed with the fire, to your question. Our structural plans are no longer accurate, right? We gotta go back in and we gotta redesign that building and all the structural elements that we have to replace. So while we're waiting to have that work done, if we were to choose to do that, 18 months, 2 years out on being able to get through that process. Meanwhile, there's no one that's gonna touch that roof. These things are just open to the elements at this point.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right. All right, so we go to public comment portion of. Yep. We'll get ya.
Pulling up the slide though.
All right, so everybody here in person will get a chance to give your 3-minute comment. And then for any of you still joining us virtually, just to refresh your memory, I'll go with the people here in person first, and then we'll come to you all virtually. If you joining us virtually could click on your hand raise button in Zoom, then we'll know to call it, that we can let you into the room. Dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand. If you're joining by phone, you can email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number if you're having difficulty with either the hand raise option. And you will also get 3 minutes to provide your comment. All right, who wants to be first? You were
Again?
first last time? Yep.
All right. Again, my name is Brad Gassman. Own the property at 1455 Gilpin, which is directly across the alley. Owned it for 24 years. I could speak directly to the condition and what has been done by the city and or developers. To echo Kylie's earlier comments, I do feel that the board here today has completely ignored the public comments and what it means to our community and the safety of the people within it. There has been deaths in the building due to drug overdoses. I personally have spearheaded dealing with all the homeless encampments there and contacting the police. The city is overburdened and will not respond when there is issues there. This fire could have been prevented if the city responded to the homeless encampments. I have called, I don't know how many times, contact the city 911 department and ask, they're sick of me calling. So I feel very ignored from the city, from this board, from the rest of the people here who are requesting it. And I understand you're restricted with what you can do as a landmark committee, but the public comments is within your definition. And there is no value here, historically speaking. Yes, the architect lived there who designed East High, but the new development could incorporate various elements and can still be a key piece of the entry into the Cheeseman Park neighborhood. And I think the developers would be willing to do something of that nature. They're not completely ignoring the historic value of the neighborhood. So I think the public comments need to be given a little more weight than they have been so far. On reconsideration on both buildings to be demoed would be my hopes, that both can be demoed so that a greater property can be built. Somebody had commented, yes, there is significant cost to building a higher building, but not as great as the cost would be. What you're gonna gain by renovating is gonna be far less than if you demoed and build new. And that's where, you know, again, maybe, as you said, the financial hardship is the place for that to be. But that's something that can be considered through the public comments, and we're expressing that here today. And we could streamline this process a little bit more. And as, you know, intelligent people here, we could recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Sir?
Again, my name's Brad Cameron. I live at 1200 Humboldt Street, and I love having the two hearings because it gives an opportunity to do some follow-up. First of all, regarding the nature of these buildings, they're clearly contributing structures, and I, like Michael Henry, was involved in the origins of the Wyman Historic District and support that entirely and very much appreciate the commission's protection of them. What I am sort of confused by is having the discussion and what's the process going forward. I envision going back and trying to tell my board, well, here are the next steps. And maybe it was clear to others, but boy, I sure got confused. I heard, you know, the economic analysis question. And again, you know, I've been involved in this process a long time and understand that typically with a demolition request, you've got to have another building proposed in a district. And so I'm trying to sort of reconcile what I heard in that discussion and when the economic analysis question comes up. And it almost seemed as though Pando is going to be asked to spend money to stabilize the building, and it's ultimately going to be demolished. It's a little unclear. So I would really appreciate, if possible, staff or the commission perhaps spelling out a little more clearly for us public members, sort of how it will unfold going forward. And perhaps it is, you know, the ordinance is maybe not really well formed. And these are opportunities perhaps to envision how there might be some tweak done to the ordinance to address this kind of situation. Because I am concerned, you know, potential purchasers of these kind of buildings, I think, need to have some sense that they're not just really getting themselves into a quagmire. I mean, again, Pando came in, these buildings were a total wreck. And, you know, they came in and had a plan to how to do something. And likewise, you know, for future designations, you know, everyone's always, I'm afraid out there, you know, members of the public look for opportunities to badmouth the landmark designation process. And, you know, we don't want a situation where, boy, talk about a catch-22, you know, you just can't get out of it. It half burns down, but yet you got to fix it. But, you know, I mean, so some clarity as to what the process going forward would really be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Next.
Sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Van Scholes at 1447 Gilpin Street. across the alley from both of these properties. I guess I'm stunned on a couple of levels. One is, I recognize your duty to stick to the rules and the around this commission. I'm also, I don't get it. Landmarks without people don't make any sense. And it seems as if you've completely ignored the current context, the safety concerns. I've been involved with a witness to multiple assaults, a rape, all kinds of things that have taken place on this property. And not just in the last few months, not just since the pandemic, but over the last 22 years. It's worse now. It was worse during the pandemic, but it's been going on for a long time. I also just think it's just beyond comprehension, the Kafkaesque sort of lack of clarity around how to address all of these issues and to do it in a reasonable way in which folks would be willing and committed to make investments in this city. Stunning to me. Thank you for the time. And I hope that they're able to go through the process, through the economic hardship or something else. I'm probably going to move away and move to some other place in the next decade. I'd love to stick around. I love Colfax and I love living there. But this is a problem. It's a massive problem. And I don't know why any family would live on my block. My daughter grew up in the house that I live in. And it was a challenge, that property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else here in person who would like to make a comment? Sir.
Thanks, man. My name is Frank Locantore, and I am a resident at 21 and homeowner at 2145 East 16th Avenue in a row home that was built before East High School. And I benefit from the maintenance and care that all of the residents prior to me living there took in order to keep those homes in great shape. I'd like to build off of a comment that Keith made earlier, is that the neglect of these buildings isn't just over the last couple of years, last few years, isn't from the pandemic. I would argue it's from the last 40 years. It's from the previous owner, and I'm speaking as a short-time former tenant of the building. The previous owner, the family owned it for decades and did absolutely nothing. Which is why I think the neighbors that I've worked with here in hosting meetings with the previous owners, begging them to do something, providing all kinds of incentives from the neighbors in order to spend a modicum of money to help protect those buildings, fell on deaf ears. And that's why I think we were all really excited when somebody new was able to wrestle those structures away from the previous family and provide an opportunity and go through 3 iterations of design in order to make the neighbors pleased with the design and enthusiastically support it. And so that's why the neighbors are here. Pretty much all the neighbors wanted to keep those buildings, and it has turned now because of the neglect of decades, not years, decades. And we wouldn't be having this hearing if there was not an opportunity for you to make a decision based upon these extenuating circumstances. And we've heard, and I work with the police very closely and constantly. And when I told them that this hearing was happening, their eyes lit up and they were like, those properties are horrible. Of course, they would not come to something like this. But I could see, and they expressed as much, that boy, if we don't have to make the decision about saving somebody's life in a building and putting one of our first responders at risk, I believe health and safety is one of the things that you're considering. That would make us as first responders feel so much more comfortable in addressing calls for service on that property. And I will say the Wyman Historic District is over 100 acres, probably 120 acres. We're talking about 2 structures on less than probably an acre of land. Thank you.
All right, anybody else here in person? Certainly.
Thank you. Did I say Andy, do I just do, Andy Baldiga
Go
again?
for it, yeah.
1540 Race Street. Thank you again for listening. I echo the frustration that in the deliberation, there wasn't much acknowledgement and I'd encourage the board to ask questions before the public hearing is closed or something, if you have those, not necessarily of us, but certainly of the applicant, if you want to know more. Looking at that same, I know there's questions about what's in the district or not. If you look at that colored map that everybody references, it seemed that says this is in. It seems to also say that on York and Colfax, 2220 East Colfax, which has the Learned Lemur and a tattoo shop in it, also next to Brews. That's all listed as a landmark property. That's very similar to, I don't know if it's actually a landmark, it's purple or it's magenta. But it's certainly in there and it's certainly a house with an attachment on it. So when we say this is the last 2 properties like this in the district, I disagree based on the documents presented earlier today. I also feel like this board should take some responsibility for the timing. I think Keith mentioned it earlier. I mean, maybe not you personally, but I don't know when you sat on this board, but the LPC process is excruciatingly long. And I'm speaking as an architect now, it takes a long time and almost no other department in the city will look at your drawings until you get through this process. These guys have gone through 7 stories, 8 stories, 5 stories, 8, 7 stories, back and forth just to get to that SDP process when all this economic development discussion comes in, trying to predict what's happening. So I hope that comes up in the economic analysis in some way, but I do think when I mentioned that the Tom's Diner or the Tavern on 17th were wins, I think they were wins because this board or the city as a whole said, hey, these are valuable pieces, but we have other tools. We can actually give, in the Tavern's case, we'll ignore this one building, but we'll give them an extra couple stories instead of 8, we'll give them 10. With the Tom's Diner through tax credits and things that I don't understand, but made that work by just taking on the building itself and what's important. I think here we're looking at we had that opportunity is gone and everybody in this room was part of it. And you're hearing from a half that was part of it and didn't get the response. We're asking you guys who were also part of it to reconsider where we sit. I think this is a critical intersection. Again, I said it a little bit earlier, there's a lot of density, a lot of change coming to this intersection. This site really should support that intersection and this neighborhood in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else here in person? I see one more hand. Address, please, sir.
Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, Chair of the Curtis Park Historic District, as well as the Five Points Cultural Historic District, representing myself today. It's a tough decision, again, but staff has done a great job. It's not perfect. Could it be more perfect? No, we're human beings. We're working through processes, obviously with Historic Denver and their statement and support of maintaining these, we are trying to tell a story. We all have tough decisions, and this really shouldn't even be before us if it was not about neglect. And it is really upon the city to deal with the homeless, to deal with a lot of these external issues that have been a real cause to why this particular project is going on, and the city is also in part derelict in their duties. Not this commission itself. I mean, yes, it is onerous, but obviously it has also been very beneficial to this city. And historic tourism is a big draw, and Welton Street itself has commercial buildings that are built in front of residential structures. And so we have this example throughout, and it does tell the story of Denver, and it is important to maintain that story. This process could definitely be improved. The city still that he has another year before they're even thinking about getting, that's unacceptable. And that's not your fault. Your purview here has been clearly stated by staff, and you guys followed that on the previous decision. It is not easy to sit and listen to residents who have very valid concerns and very valid dealings with this property, but this has, you know, these were meant to be fires, and the interiors fall and we rebuild. The structural issues are not that an issue because you have a structure that many of these in Curtis Park burnt and they popped the tops. We have now new 2-story buildings that were 1-story buildings that had fires. And that's another story that is being told through, you know, historic preservation. So I agree, it's not perfect, but you guys are doing the best that you can, and I do thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else in person? All right, not seeing any other hands. Let's turn to our people joining us virtually. I see Scott. Scott's hand up. Scott, whenever you hear us, you can join us.
Yeah, I can hear you. As someone who sat on the other side watching some of the other virtual participants, it's your online platform that has a delay. It's not the people trying to participate here.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm totally aware of that. No worries.
So as someone who got to witness this from afar, I'm shocked with what I saw and completely underwhelmed by the process, and just want to express my frustration. It felt crystal clear from a distance that the committee had made up their mind before you walked into the meeting room. You heard pleas from everyone that's directly affected by this property to act on this, to do something about it. And shocked by the outcome, I can live with that. I'm actually more appalled by the level of bias I witnessed from the panel in discussing and deliberating. The desire to support your colleagues is not your call to duty. Your desire to apply the guidelines and get to the right outcome is the call. And so I was really underwhelmed by what I saw today, and really gives me a lack of confidence in this committee on a go-forward basis. I wish people would reconsider. This is a common sense decision, and somehow we're letting jargon and technical language stand in the way of progress here. If any one of you had to live within a few blocks of this place, I would be floored if you would be willing to put up with the way this committee approached this decision. And so I just want to go on record expressing my frustration with what I witnessed today. I don't have a lot of confidence that anyone's going to be able to get through this, given the level of dialogue and the intention that these guys are bringing to the table to make improvements in a part of town that is dying for some investment. And to watch how hard it is to invest in our city to make things better just gives me a very low level of confidence. So this doesn't feel like a proper use of taxpayer dollars, and I'm appalled by what I was witnessed today. So thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else virtually? No. Okay, great. Staff, do you have any additional comments?
I do have some follow-up. I want to clarify the architectural firm for this project is SAR Shears Atkins and Rockmore. Just in case the commission was curious. Again, they have a SDP approval. They're still going through their permitting process. To address some of the public comment and the process, I want to reference the landmark ordinance. So the landmark ordinance does have a condition about remitting of dangerous conditions. And it states, in case where the Building Inspection Division of CPD, the Department of Public Health and Environment, or the Fire Department, or any other duly authorized officer or agency of the city, or city orders or directs the construction, reconstruction, alteration, repair, or demolition of any improvements to a structure for preservation or structure in a district for preservation for the purpose of remitting dangerous conditions determined by that department, agency, or or officer to be imminently dangerous to life, health, safety, property. Said work may proceed without further delay imposed by any reason of this chapter, provided any such department, agency, or officer shall give the commission notice prior to issuance of any such order or directive. Nothing contained herein shall be construed as making it a violation of this chapter for any person to comply with such order or directive without receipt of statement from the commission. So that essentially says if the building official, the fire department, or any other public health, environment, safety, say this structure has to be demolished, only thing that needs to occur is notice to the commission for that to proceed. That has not occurred in these properties. We have not been given that directive that these need to be demolished tomorrow. So that is not in consideration today because we have not been given that directive. So in terms of what is the process going forward, our ordinance also outlines that process, and that process is the economic hardship process. And our ordinance was revised in 2019 to specifically state that the economic hardship process can only be applied for once the commission has reviewed and denied the request to demolish. So step one in reviewing and addressing the city's issuance of unsafe structure and wreck or repair order is the request for demolition by the applicant before this commission. So that is the step one in the process. That's where we are right now. That's step one of that demolition review. The applicant can appeal through the economic hardship process, which is a public hearing, again, before the commission. The applicant has 30 days from the denial of the denial of demolition to apply for that economic hardship process. It just needs to be made in writing to the commission that the applicant is pursuing that process. There is several pieces of paperwork that are involved in applying for the economic hardship process. And I have already provided the applicant the application for economic hardship and the requirements there. And I'm almost 100% certain that's what they will be pursuing post this public hearing. And we will notice that once that public hearing is ready to move forward, because there are several pieces of documentation that are required. So I can't say what date that will occur yet, but it's likely that that will be occurring soon. Again, as I said, there was no indication that we as the city are going to require them to invest money in this property at this time. I indicated that we would work with the appropriate departments on timelines and complying with that wreck and repair order. And there's no indication that at this time that we're requiring to invest any money into those properties at this time. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then in terms of the SDP process, this project has been in SDP for several years. I've been involved in that process. Landmark review is concurrent with the SDP process. So we are tied in and involved in that process. And we are tied in and involved in that process to facilitate reviews that are large development reviews like this project and make sure that the applicant is getting all city comments at one time and can address all of those city comments at one time so that it can successfully go through the process. We do have our process. We have a 4-week filing deadline for all applications. If you submit a complete application, we schedule it for commission review within that 4-week time frame. Our ordinance used to say we act on those applications within 30 days. We move very quickly here at Landmark compared to other departments. I know they're still going through permitting. I know permitting is backed up. The city is trying to reduce that by 30%, but it is a monumental task. A lot of how quickly an SDP process goes through and gets approved does impact how quickly the applicant responds to those comments that they're given by the city. And we do have deadlines in which we as city agencies are required to respond to all SDP and provide comments to applicants. But I know they're long processes and I don't want to downplay that they are extensive and long processes.
Okay, commissioners, any questions for Brittany? Nope. All right, no more questions for staff. Then I will close the public comment, 3:12 and we will, like it's 3:14, sorry. So commissioners, let's go into deliberation. What are your thoughts?
I'd just like to say that, you know, there was a comment about someone being thankful that we had a second chance per se in talking about this. I'll agree with that in the sense that as a commissioner, I frequently, after our meetings, I'm like, I wish I had said this. I wish I had acknowledged this. And certainly I want to acknowledge that you know, public comments were certainly heard and taken into account. I always take notes. I neglected this time to acknowledge that, you know, we heard those. But I know for myself, and I'm sure for my other commissioners, that we did hear those. But I will say too, that we are a body of experts of different stripes. And the reason we've been kind of put on this commission, nominated to this commission, is that we have maybe a bigger picture or a different way of looking at some of these issues. And so while certainly it's important to hear from the public, they don't necessarily always inform. It's not a democratic process in that sense of hearing these projects at this commission. I don't mean to dismiss public comments, but just to explain that they are not the end all of our decision making. And I also would like to say that, you know, I certainly hear the frustration. I think Brittany spoke to this very well as far as kind of delays or processes, bureaucracy. However, I think it's important to acknowledge that we have certain steps that we are tasked with kind of moving through in order to ensure that these irreplaceable historic buildings are not kind of dismissed out of hand, that they are given a full hearing on their own, as it were, that we are not going to, because something's hard, we are not going to then say it's worth getting rid of something that we can't ever get back. So I would just like to say that in regards to both this project and the project we heard before. In regards to this project, I think, you know, this is a whole other animal and also very similar in that it is not, this was not damaged by fire. I think the same issues still apply as far as integrity and the design guidelines, you know, stipulating that all efforts are made to preserve a contributing building. I think this building still retains a high level of integrity to keep it as contributing to the Wyman Historic District. Therefore, I agree with staff that we should deny this application.
Thank you. Other commissioners, comments?
I agree with what Erica said, especially about public comment. We're on this commission because of a selection process due to our perspectives and our knowledge and experience in dealing with historic properties and the rules, regulations, guidelines, and standards. And while the public sometimes appreciates what we do, the public doesn't always understand those restrictions in the same way that we have an obligation to. I mean, we have a responsibility here to the greater public, not just neighbors who live next to an eyesore. And the history of Denver is a asset to everybody that lives in Denver. And we're here to protect that asset for all the people in Denver. And it's unfortunate I understand. I mean, I lived a half a block off of Colfax for, in two different cases, the most recent one, 20 years. And I understand that Colfax is an interesting street. And frankly, I don't have a lot of hopes that BRT is going to change it. It'll change it some, but it won't make it Rodeo Drive. And that's not to say it's not a good thing, but a lot of people put stock into some of these long-range city plans that are based on a vision that takes a long time to develop, and sometimes it doesn't. That's a sort of the context that I think this is an important corner. It's an important corner that the very first parkway in Denver, Park Avenue, terminates at this location. And whatever happens here, it was Fanny's corner for years and years and years, even though I don't know if Fanny has been there in the last 20 years. So it was a landmark, independent of its designation. And so it's a very important place. And I think Fanny might have built the building there because of its location. I just think that that history needs to be respected in some fashion. And we don't know, other than the proposal to tear down what's there, how that history will be respected. So I think we don't really have any choice but to deny demolition at this time.
Gary, thank you. Anyone
Yeah.
else? George?
Well, it's, there's sometimes a huge gulf between the public interest and what the public is interested in. And I think we have to have the larger view. And I remember being enthused when the first plan was proposed that we voted on, and I was excited about it. I mean, I've known the Stanley Furs building, and that's how I call it, for 40 years. Life doesn't come with a warranty, so they should just press on. And yes, we heard the voices of 5, 6, 10 public voices. That doesn't necessarily mean they represent the views of the 1,000 other people that live in the area. These are the people most committed. They had a point of view, and we have heard it. So let us move on. I will support the.
Anybody else? Larry?
Yeah, so I can completely understand the viewpoint of a lot of the members of the public who have, spoken out with a lot of concern about this building. I live in Capitol Hill. I go by that building fairly often, and I've had, over the course of my life living in Denver, come across that building, or those two buildings, in different states over the years, and it's never been great. And so I understand that, and I think maybe to some extent that was part of why we were trying to clarify what our role was in the first review, that these are the aspects that we are looking at, and not, we don't have purview over safety issues and related sort of social matters. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and to say that I agree with regards to this particular project, that or this particular building, that nothing really has changed here post fire in any significant way as per the structural analysis, and so I would support denial.
All right, great, thanks. Grant?
Yeah, I appreciate what everyone has shared, and I know as a mission today, we feel a little on the defense perhaps. And it's a difficult process. I'm gonna say it again, we have to remind ourselves and public commenters all the time that we can't consider landscaping. And just because there's a big tree and you can't see it, there's a lot of smaller and less impactful, but similarly nuanced reasons that we can and can't acknowledge certain things. And I don't think we need to belabor that any further. Unfortunately, we can't resolve that today. We're with 50 years of history of this body and the ordinance, but 1618 specifically sits in a condition that's very similar to when it was before. JVA's report also substantiates that. An application for demolition of this building unrelated to the fire would be very hard to justify. And so I think even though these two were coupled, and we understand the concerns that we've heard today, by virtue of what's been previously approved and the protections that are in place for this building, which hasn't had that effect, I think it's hard not to agree with staff here. I just wanted to, again, be specific about the distinction between the two in spite of their coupling.
Yeah.
And it's unfair that we have to use words like integrity to define broken old buildings, right? But that's something that the Secretary of the Interior standards say that's been established by levels of government language and ordinances that far predate any of our professional experience. And it's confusing language like that. It's these processes. We can't make an excuse for that, but we're doing our best to interpret that in the middle of it right now. And so I think understanding the fire damage is a different piece. We've crossed that bridge for now. We'll see it again. It's another process, just like a designation where an owner may not be interested. City council makes that final call. We're a body here doing our best to interpret the charge we've been given. And today's a hard day for that. I don't like it. I don't like how it feels today. But I think given what we understand as our mission, that staff's report here for 1618 is what I agree with as well.
All right, Graham, Nick, did you have anything?
I don't have anything further to add. I do agree with staff.
All right, then let's not belabor it. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair,
All right.
I move to deny application number 2024-LMDEMO-098 for the total demolition of 1618 Colfax Avenue as per Chapter 30 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. Design Guideline 2.58, character defining features for the Wyman Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Do I hear a second? George has seconded it. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? All right, then the application has been denied. All right, would anybody like to take a little bit of a break? Usually we break at 3 o'clock. And I really would like to thank all of you for coming. I know that probably doesn't sound sincere, but I'm really glad you were here. Thank you for coming and being part of the process. Shall we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
So it's 3:27, we'll return in 5 minutes.
All right, we're back at it now. We're back from our break. Everybody's here, so let's get on with our design review process. So let me explain a little bit how that goes. I'll announce the design review items on the agenda in order by the address. Commission members will of course announce any ex parte contracts or conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and recommendation, and commissioners can question the staff. The applicant will then have 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes to give their presentation, and commissioners may question the applicant. Public comment for design review is actually 2 minutes per person, so that's a 1 minute different from public comment. If you would like to speak and you're here in person, just raise your hand. I'll make sure you get a chance, and that's for people who are not involved, not a part of the actual application team. And if there's anybody joining us virtually who would like to make a comment, what you would do is use your little hand raise button on Zoom. For those calling via the phone, you would dial *9 to raise your hand. If you're having difficulty with either hand raise option, email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number, and then staff can clarify if necessary. The commission will deliberate, and commission will make a motion and then vote. And important to note that the LPC, we can only consider information that was part of our application packet on the website. And our first, and this was on the consent agenda, if you'll remember, and it was pulled off to P and design review, so it's 2024-COA-277 at 375 Gilpin Street in the Country Club District, and our staff person is Jessie.
All right, so this is 375 Gilpin Street. It was constructed in 1920, and this is a contributing building to the Country Club Historic District. So the applicant is requesting to alter the existing non-historic additions on the building, add new additions to the side and back of the house, replace and alter doors and windows, and construct a new garage. So as you can see here, this building does have two wings. From Sanborn maps, we can see early footprints of wings existing. One was an attached garage to this structure. So that has remained, that overall footprint has remained intact on this site since its early construction. Later on, and you can see this in the information in the packet, but also in the upper left-hand corner here on the screen, the tops were popped on those wings and significantly altered after the period of significance for this historic district. So the applicant is requesting to demolish the attached garage and upper story addition. Both of those are non-historic. And they're requesting to construct a portico with an addition over top on the right-hand side of the building. And then on the left-hand side of the building, they are keeping that brick addition intact. But they are going to skin it with a wood paneling so that it is more recognizable as a modern addition to the structure, but are maintaining that that two-story wing on the left-hand side of the building. They will be extending that wing back off the back of the house, and then making alteration to doors and windows on the back and sides of the house. Most of the alterations on the main historic structure will be to restore window configurations to their historic configurations. For example, on the north elevation, they're proposing to increase the size of the third story or attic window on either that flanks the side of the chimney, so that it replicates the other chimney flanking windows on both sides of the property. The final piece to this is that they're going to construct a garage at the back of the lot. Staff did feel that it met the guidelines, specifically guideline B4 of the Country Club guidelines, as it is subordinate to the primary structure. Guideline 4.18 referencing the surrounding historic context. There are several 3 to 4 car garages down this block. So it is not an uncommon garage size. This will be located at the back of the lot, using an existing curb cut at the front of the lot and the alley to access it. And it is compatible with existing historic context in this district. Also referencing 4.19 for compatibility and subordination for that garage. Again, like I said, it's located at the back of the lot, is subordinate in size and scale to the primary structure. It's recognizable as modern, as a modern garage while fitting in with the overall garage context for this neighborhood. And then finally, 4.20, it is proposing to use materials that are traditional in nature, but help it to be recognizable as a modern garage. So staff is recommending approval of this application. And I can list the cited guidelines here real quick. We're citing design guidelines for Country Club 4B, B7, and C6. And then for the landmark design guidelines, we're citing 2.14, 2.20, 2.24, 3.1 through 3.8 4.8 through 4.20, and then 5.18.
Jesse, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
I do, and this gets to why I asked to remove it from the consent agenda. Two things. That you know, based on your answer, you know, I'll be satisfied. I'll hopefully be satisfied.
Promises.
B3, the country club guidelines, talks about garages and that they should be placed at the back of the property, and then in which they're doing. And then B5 talks about driveways. And my understanding is there's an existing curb cut, an existing driveway that leads to the garage that's attached to the house.
Correct.
And what they're proposing to do is leave that driveway, pass under the house, and to a garage that's accessed from both sides. And is there precedent that, well, first of all, is that okay given the guidelines in staff's view? And then secondarily, is there precedent for that in the neighborhood? Because it seems like it would fly in the face of the guidelines as it relates to suitable I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but there's no precedent for a drive-through to an alley. I mean, it seems like it would be wildly out of place.
I can't speak to context. I don't know of any other examples where it would have like a pass-through driveway. I know there are porticos or not porticos, portico shares in this historic district. That's not uncommon. Staff wasn't too concerned with this, as this is an existing curb cut, and they are putting this garage towards the back of the lot and making it subordinate in scale to the primary structure. And there is context to support front access garages. There's also context in this neighborhood to support alley access garages. And this is just kind of smushing those two things together. I don't know of any specific examples of a portico share that accesses into a garage and is also access off the alley.
I appreciate that. And then secondly, the porte cochere as it's presented, is it because it's a mirror of the wing to the south, doesn't feel like a porte cochere in Country Club. And I walk through there all the time, so I see them, and it seems like it's again wildly out of place and not in keeping with the existing structure or the wing. So and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are regarding that.
So while this isn't a typical configuration for a porte cochere, we weren't too troubled by it, again, because it's recognizable as a modern addition. And there are porte cocheres in this district, maybe not with an addition over top. The applicant also provided some example photos of other paneled wings in this historic district, which they drew their inspiration from. And that's what staff based it off of, is that, oops, sorry, I moved off. I was trying to find the specific page in the application. But staff felt that it was recognizable as a modern addition. It did draw from the context in the district without being too replicative. And we felt that it was subordinate to that primary structure. And they're also they're referencing the existing height for that non-historic addition. So they're maintaining that height of the non-historic addition there as well.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jesse? Sure. Okay, great. Is our applicant here? Thanks, Jesse. That's totally fine. Come on up, have a seat, and you'll have 2 minutes to tell us about the project and start with your name and address, please.
Deb Yuki, I work at 921 Santa Fe for B&B Design Build.
Olga Bednovar, same, we've been working on this project.
We're representing the homeowner, Kevin and Diane Wilshire.
Excellent, thanks.
So just a note from Kevin, just to, he recognizes there's different bricks, and it's very evident that these structures did change. You know, we went through the Sanborn maps and noticed that the footprints were a little bit different, and there was a permit pulled in 46, which was just outside the significance, the historical significance period. And yeah, he references the different porte cocheres in the neighborhood and garages that do have rear access as well as front. So we just wanted to second that.
He does, I'm sorry, it's
Sorry,
not questions.
yeah,
I'll wait.
Yeah, you can wait. You'll have plenty of time to ask that.
Commission can ask you questions after you.
After your
present,
presentation,
so.
yeah. Let us know when you're done with your presentation.
You have any?
No?
Okay.
Okay, well then that is your, okay,
Alright.
okay, terrific. Let's see. So I bet there's a question for you.
Sorry about jumping the gun on that.
No, no,
And appreciate you being here and also for staying longer than you'd anticipated.
Yeah.
But there were just a couple questions. I guess I'll start by asking you what I asked staff regarding the program first. You know, why the need to keep the curb cut, a pass through a porte cochere to a pass through garage programmatically? What was your client after in trying to get all that straight through accessibility to the alley?
Can you speak to that? It's just the design that they were, that spoke to them, really.
And so your client, you said, texted you and he said there is precedent for a pass-through garage from front to back in Country Club?
I think 345, which is in the application, is a double-sided garage on the alley, as you can see. Sorry to interrupt again.
No, you're fine.
No worries. It appears like in the Preston images that are included, you can see the garage doors under the porte cochere, but then the bigger piece in the alley.
I looked at that, I couldn't see it.
It's a two-story, almost like a carriage house, but it's got a garage, yeah. Coming through the backside.
Yeah.
So it's existing functionality.
Doors down, which is the precedent that was referenced, yeah.
Got it. Very good. I'm satisfied.
Okay.
Thanks.
Excellent. Any other questions, commissioners, for applicants? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
All right. Do we have anyone here in the public that wants to comment on the project? Doesn't look like it. Anybody virtually, Taylor? That would like to make a comment on this project? We do have one person, Kevin.
That's a property owner.
Oh, that's a property owner. Okay, that's part of the,
Well, we still have
Time.
8
Oh, that's true.
minutes
Yeah, that's
and
true.
48 seconds. So.
That's okay. Well, we will give him 8 minutes and 48 seconds if he would like to take it. Kevin?
Yes.
Hi,
can-
Kevin.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good. We can hear you. There's still time left over from the applicant presentation, so we've got 8 minutes and 48 seconds for you to make your comment if you wish.
Oh, okay, sure. So I raised my hand because of 345 Gilpin Street, which is what we kind of came up with the idea about the porte cochere around 2 houses down from us. Our idea was to build the back garage in order to get a second car. We only have a 1-car garage now. And we felt like we were trying to be as minimally invasive as possible, keeping the driveway and having it drive through, much like the house 2 doors down. And the reason we liked the back alleyway exit as well is because if you park a car, you know, you drive up onto the porte cochere, it's a rainy day to pull stuff into the house and somebody needs to leave from the garage, they could do so as well. So we were trying to incorporate the design that existed, understanding that the current garage was going to be a drive-through to a back garage. So I just thought I would add that color. And then I raised my hand because I was trying to point out that 345 had the you know, the porte cochere that we used as inspiration for the idea.
Thank
Great.
you.
Kevin, commissioners, do you have any questions for Kevin before he goes? All right, Kevin, thank you for joining us. Doesn't look like there are any questions for you, so
Thank you.
oh, thank you. All right, staff, any other comments from staff? No, nothing. All right, commissioners, let's go into deliberation. What are your thoughts?
Just want to understand how are they going to manage the remotes for all those doors?
Not our problem. That is not our purview. It's just as well as I manage the remotes to my own one TV. Any other comments, commissioners? All right, do I hear a motion from the floor?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve application 2023-COA-277 for alterations, additions, and garage at 375 Gilpin Street per design guidelines B4, B7, C6, 2.14, 2.20, 2.24, 3.1 through 3.8, 4.18 through 4.20, 5.18 character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Graham, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I think Erica beat you, Larry. So Erica seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, it has been approved unanimously. Yeah, good luck with your project.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to our next design review project, which is 2024-COA-283 at 3327 West Hayward Place in Potter Highlands. And Crystal is our staff person. Crystal?
Hello, thank you. Okay. Showing up. Great. And I get to control the screen.
In theory.
In theory. We'll see.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Okay. All right, so this is for 3327 West Hayward Place. This is a phase 2 design detail application. Phase 1 was previously reviewed and approved on November 21st, 2023. The new infill structure is proposed to be a simplified Queen Anne style hipped roof house with a new detached garage in the L&M Ghost Historic District. So just here on the screen, you can see the site plan for the new structure. The new house will be set back from the street and will align with neighboring properties. The house will also have a new 2-car garage that will be accessed from the alley. Let's see. Nope. Okay, so here's the proposed design. Like I said, simplified version of a Queen Anne style with a 2-story porch and nested gables with a cross gable bump out, which is characteristic of other Queen Anne properties found within the historic district. The new 2-story house will include typical features and rhythms found in the historic district, such as window locations, proportions, and that porch location. The overall building height of 30 feet is typical to the district, and the porch and entry location are also typical. The facade uses articulation techniques such as the trim belt course as well as trim window surrounds. Minor changes have been made to the design since phase 1 to better fit in with the historic context. Particularly the 2-story porch now has a closed gable where it was previously open, and the shingle detailing at the gable ends on all sides of the house has been brought down to the eaves to better match historic proportions as seen at the front and rear facades here. Next slide. So here's the side elevation with the bump out and that second entrance at the basement. The home will be clad in a simple James Hardie smooth fiber cement lap siding with a 5-inch reveal and with plank and straight edge shingles in the gable ends with trim at the appropriate locations. Next slide. And then here's the other side elevation where you can see the two-story front porch to the right with a simple vertical railing. The home will feature individual and paired 1/1 windows with headers and sills, with those trim detail surrounds at all elevations. Door placements, widths, and heights align with historic proportions. Slide. And then here's the proposed garage that will be located at the rear of the lot in a typical location for secondary structures, with garage doors facing the alley, and will be clad to match the primary structure. And then here are some details showing the proposed two-story front porch with a simple wood railing, as well as the window details showing a minimum 2-inch inset on the windows to the wall plane, but with a total 3-inch inset to the trim detailing around the windows. Next slide. And then finally, here you can see some of the proposed materials for the structure, as well as the proposed fiberglass doors. The proposed infrastructure and garage design details are compatible and contextual to the historic district. Therefore, staff is recommending approval. Staff also would like to note there is an error in the staff report, as I realized this morning. I didn't correct the motion to call out that this was the phase 2 design detail submittal. So just wanted to let you guys know to correct that in the motion. That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right, Crystal, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Crystal? Doesn't look like it. Well done, you. The applicant here.
They might be on Zoom.
Zoom is on Zoom. All right.
Yeah.
Mary.
I was gonna say, I have
I think it's Ginger.
on my list. Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Mary might be the property owner too. Yeah, she's
the property owner, you need Taylor.
Very.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Hello, can you hear us? Give us a sign.
There we are.
There you go. Okay,
Just letting you know that we're here if there are any questions.
great. Okay, thanks. You've got 10 minutes to give your presentation if you want to start with your name and address. Otherwise, if you don't have any presentation, then that's up to you.
Well, we don't have a presentation. We don't know that Ginger is on the line or not. She was going to do the talking.
Oh, okay,
She
all
may not
right.
be here.
I think we tried to get her on, didn't we?
We've tried to promote her, but she hasn't
Okay,
accepted.
well, we're available. We would love to see this built. We think it'll match the neighborhood very well. And we're excited to do it.
All right, hang on a second and we'll see if, commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicant? Nope, no questions for you. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for joining us even for
Thank
just a
you.
brief moment. Yeah, of
And
course.
Ginger, if you're there, if you could accept our invite to join as panelist.
There. Declined.
Connect as a panelist and it's just spinning.
Junior is not getting what she wants. Yeah.
Okay.
So the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
That's a lot on the day.
Ginger, you could also try calling in.
Looks like she dropped off.
Yeah, she might be doing that now.
Just give it a second.
I like the color in the photo. It's not great.
I just texted her that she can try calling in.
Okay.
All right. We'll give her a second here, and otherwise we'll need to get on with the meeting. All right.
I think since we're not recommending denial, we can probably.
We heard from the owner.
Yeah, we heard from the owner, so, all right, we're gonna go ahead and move forward. There weren't any questions for you all, so.
Ginger just joined, but she is on mute.
Oh, well, that's not gonna help. Ginger, if you can take yourself off mute, that would be great, and then. Ginger, yeah, you can unmute yourself, ask to unmute.
Well, Ginger, I think we're gonna move forward, as we're not recommending denial, and I don't think we have major concerns, from staff anyways.
Yeah, we need to move on, so let's go ahead and ask for any public comments on the project here, no? Are there any, public comments virtually? It didn't look like it, we didn't have any hands raised. Okay, great, any other comments from staff? No, okay, commissioners, let's go into deliberation then. What are your thoughts on this project?
Cute house.
All right,
I support that.
okay. All right, do I hear a motion from the floor?
Chair, I move to approve application number 2024 COA 283 for phase 2 design details for the new proposed infill structure at 3327 West Hayward Place. As per presented testimony, submitted documentation, design guidelines 4.3, 4.5, 4.7, 4.8, 4.19. The Allen and Ghost character defining features, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
All right, thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Graham has seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
And opposed, nay? All right, well, the application has been approved, so 2024 COA 283 has been approved, so you can go forward and be in contact with Crystal. And speaking of Crystal, she is our staff person for our next design review project, which is 2022 COA 324 at 331 University Boulevard in the Country Club District. Take it away, Crystal.
Thank you. So here you can see 331 University Boulevard, which is a new infill structure in the Country Club Historic District. It was built recently after review and approval by the commission. The commission approved their phase 2 application on August 2nd, 2022. The landmark inspector, Lauren Gleason, went out to review the project in April and found several items on the site that did not match the approved plans. Most were minor issues that could be resolved administratively. However, the original plans called out a 2-inch window inset that was found to be lacking on the stucco and shiplap portions of the new infill structure and on the garage, which was not an issue that could be resolved administratively. The applicants were unwilling to redo the windows to meet the requirements per the approved plans due to the high cost. And the original plans did have the 2-inch window inset in the plans originally. The application has since had 2 minor revisions, but the window details were never changed during those revisions. So the inset was required and shown in the plans the entire time. So here you can see photos from the site visit of the front facade. As you can see, the brick portions of the structure do have the windows inset. It's only the shiplap and stucco portions of the structure that are lacking the required 2-inch window inset. Next slide. So here on the right, you can see the approved plans outlined in purple that do not show a trim surround. Here at the center is another photo showing existing conditions. And then here on the left, you can see the new proposed plans outlined in orange, showing a new added trim to be applied around the windows to try and meet that 2-inch inset requirement. And the windows are just circled here. Next slide. And then here's the south elevation, again, approved plans outlined in purple on the right, and the new proposed plans outlined in orange, showing all the added trim that is proposed with this application. And again, another photo from the site visit where you can see that the windows are flush with the wall plane. Next slide. And then again, here's the north elevation, just showing those added trim details that are being proposed with these plans. Next slide. So finally, here are the details from the approved plans, calling out that 2-inch inset for the windows on the right, outlined in purple, outlined in orange on the left is the new proposal that adds that applied trim. The applicant is proposing to add additional trim detailing around all the windows on the stucco and shiplap portions of the structure and the garage to meet the 2-inch inset requirement. Staff does not believe this solution is sufficient to meet design guideline 4.8F, which states to inset a window into the wall plane at least 2 inches from the wall plane. For a double or single hung window, the inset may be measured from the lower sash. Staff did let the applicant know that trim could be calculated into the overall inset, but we would be looking for the trim to be a standard trim thickness and that windows should not be coplanar with the wall plane, which was the intent of the required 2-inch inset. Additionally, guideline 4.8F clearly states to inset into the wall plane at least 2 inches. Staff does not believe adding trim after the fact is meeting this design guideline and also changes the look of the windows collectively and the overall design. Therefore, staff is recommending denial of the application.
Crystal, thanks. Commissioners, any questions for Crystal? Nope, not one. All right. Are the applicants here?
Yes, they're here.
Okay, great. Then if the applicants could, whoever's
Bring
doing the
the
presentation.
PDF in there.
Yeah, I
think
think
I accidentally closed it. Well, I just did now. So great.
All right.
Let's try this again.
Thanks for waiting. Sorry, it's been such a long.
Of course.
And just wait for me to pull up the presentation because I accidentally closed it. And then you'll just need to let me know when you would like the slides changed.
And when we get it up, you'll have 10 minutes to make a presentation. If you could start with your name and address.
Okay. When y'all are ready.
My name is Nick Young. I'm with Mod Architecture Plus Design at 2060 Hoyt Street. I think I wish this would have been included in the staff report so you guys could have reviewed because our direction with this at one point was trying to interpret the definition of a 2-inch recess because the large concern with this is we have conflicting diagrams shared in section 4.8 in reference as those supplementary, as we've been informed, those are supplementary sketches, for instance, to the left of which appear to be measured to the outside of trims and or sills or headers to the glass face of a window. And then when comparing that, if we're able to zoom in on those, and then if you compare that to a subset of section 4.8, letter F, it clearly says wall plane. I agree with staff's interpretation of a wall plane should not include trims and headers. I think we have a supplementary drawing that does not adhere to the intent of that. So I totally agree with that. I think for today, however, this document that we put together and staff's interpretation of what we had shared thus far before these documents, I totally agree with as well. However, what we wanted to do rather than just provide trim was we went and we looked at every single building in the district other than brick. So what we've documented here is every single stucco siding, stucco with trim building. So what you'll see is every primary structure represented here. And if you wouldn't mind, go back one last slide.
Sorry, I can only go.
And the entire intent of this study was for I would presume if I'm writing these guidelines, the hierarchy of the bold is the intent of section 4.8, and then these subsets are possible ways to adhere to that big overlying idea. So there in bold of 4.8, it's to design windows, doors, and other features to be compatible with the historic contributing primary structures in the historic context. So our next steps moving forward are to identify the context and find out indeed how window applications are represented in this district. So now if we go. So here we analyzed all of those. Next slide, please. And so what we came is we essentially identified 4 different types of primary structures. Buildings that were all brick, of which every single one had recessed windows, obviously due to construction techniques of brick, and windows are to the framing, and then the brick allows that punched window. From there, we then saw 3 other types. We saw full stucco applications with recessed windows appeared to be roughly 2 inches. We then also had full stucco primary structures without windows that were recessed. And then on the next page, we'll see, and we can stay here. On the next page, you'll also see, sorry, I guess there's 4 additional types. Stucco with wood trims. And then you'll also see, we have a 4th category of siding with trims. And we wanted to identify these because these are the 2 applications of 331 University, the subject property. How we address the windows in the stucco and how we address the windows in our horizontal siding in this case. So the first ones, straight stucco buildings. We found 14 primary structures, 8 of which had recessed windows, 6 of which did not have recessed windows in the stucco application. If we go to the next slide, please. In addition, we found 10 additional homes that had stucco finish with trims applied. These trims appear to be extra thick as well, about 1.5 inches thick in all of these applications. So essentially we found 24 stucco primary structures, of which only 8 had recessed windows. All of the rest structure, these windows are actually flush with the wall plane and or the stucco finish, and then the trim is proud of that stucco finish. And if we could go 1 more slide, please. We then identified 7 homes with siding, and these were either appeared to be a board and batten or shingle siding or horizontal lap siding, of which none of the windows were recessed in these applications 2 inches. All of which, however, did have trims. So, last slide, please. What we would like to discuss today is how to best achieve the intent of section 4.8, which it appears as if a 2-inch requirement, a stucco and or siding application. There is only 8 out of 24 stucco buildings that have that detail, and there are 0 other homes with a siding detail of a 2-inch recessed window. So I think seeing this building built, however, I believe the intent of this for, let's say, the windows and the siding applications, I believe we should add trim to the siding applications. I think it would add detail, add some shadow lines. It'd be nice. I think the stucco applications, since only 8 out of 24 actually had 2-inch recessed windows and from the wall plane of stucco, I feel as if we could go either way quite easily and make an argument for that, of which we would prefer to not come in with additional trim over the stucco for a number of reasons.
Okay, great. Commissioners, questions?
I guess, do you know how this occurred, given that you had drawn the detail to not, or to have the recess?
I have my opinions on a number of things. I think from our design perspective, we went from the glass face of that window, of which, dependent on the selection of window, these were much flusher, that window pane, than we had thought to the finished material. So I think in a stucco and siding application, we obviously have a very conflicting supplementary diagram too, of which I think is actually way more clear than vocabulary that says wall plane. However, not that I agree with it, but I think as a designer, that is extremely clear. You have dimension lines going to the furthest most of that wall plane, in this case, let's say trim or header or sill, to a window pane. In regards to staff's comment that We were actually told by Amy that you guys would clarify what that dimension would be. So we did not receive clarity in regards to what that 2 inches actually measured to and from. And I have emails of that. That being said, I think there needs to be clarity in the guidelines of what this is, a 2-inch recess, so future applicants can clearly do this. I think in general, it's as simplistic as a 2x rather than a 2x4 than a 2x6 inset buck. If that was a standard detail, this wouldn't be a problem ever. However, I think I'm not here to necessarily talk about the definition of a 2-inch recess. I'm here to just present the overlying idea of section 4.8 is to provide new construction that adheres to existing primary historic context, of which to do so, from what we gather, there are very little precedents of a requirement of a 2-inch recessed window in the siding and stucco applications.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so I guess to go back to, so you're saying that the windows that were actually installed may have been different in the location of the glass than the windows that were originally.
Yes and
specified
no,
and
because I
approved by
don't even,
landmark?
I still not clear what we're actually measuring.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, yeah, if there's some other issue of the windows were entirely not what was approved by landmark. But yeah, that's not what was brought up here, so I won't go into that further.
Okay, other questions? Yeah.
This was a non-contributing structure to begin with, is that right?
This is new.
It's new
infill.
New infill, but I mean, the building that was there was.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah. got
Very
it.
Pomo.
I did have one more comment, actually, when we started this project, if you look at the annex of this district, we're actually outside to the east of the lines. However, we were still brought into this due to our alleyway, from my understanding, and the presence on University. But I think that should be noted.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much, sir. All right, public comments. Is there anybody here in person that's not part of the applicant team? Do we have anybody joining us virtually that would like to make a comment? It does not look like it. Okay, great. Then do we have staff redirect?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on it.
Of course.
I didn't mention the country club guidelines, but I obviously put them in the staff report. So I just point out to F3 that windows should have a punched opening. I also wanted to note for the presentation the applicant provided today. I didn't receive that until midday Thursday. It was a bit late. I did allow it, but I did not get to review or look at any of the addresses or examples that they really provided. So I don't know how accurate that information is, if those are in the district, et cetera. And then just to follow up on the diagrams, so with the design guidelines, staff typically takes the role that text is what takes precedent. We do provide images and diagrams and such to help direct and show what we're trying to say, but text does take precedent. The applicant did ask repeatedly about how we were measuring. I felt that I answered that the best I could, which is that we were measuring from the wall plane. The wall plane that was provided in their plans was just the wall because there was no trim. So them adding trim to us didn't really meet the guideline. There are instances, obviously, even in our diagrams that show a trim that is there, but that's usually integrated and that's proposed with the plans originally. So to us, it didn't meet it in that respect. And also we had concerns that adding all this trim now maybe changed the design enough. And so that's why we felt it should come back to you.
I also have some additional follow-up.
Sure.
Just on this project, history in general. So this is firmly within the country club.
Yeah.
Historic district. It wasn't pulled in because the alley or anything like that. This entire block is within country club. This was originally Abby Chrisman's project. She transitioned off the design review team. She's still on the landmark team, but she's planning and regulatory now. This project, the phase 2 was initially reviewed by the commission in August. of 2022. And it looks like Crystal stamped the plans on September 29th, 2022. So the diagram in question in this very specific guideline regarding 2 inches was a revision to the design guidelines that were formally adopted in November of 2022. However, we provided that clarification in the design guidelines because we have required for a number of years that windows be inset 2 inches into the wall plane. That's been in our COA for years and years and is part of the COA language that hasn't changed. Additionally, we do require applicants to provide that section detail showing that. That is always a very specific request of staff because this is often an issue. So that's just some background for you as the commission to consider as this project does predate some of those diagrams and that very specific language, but it doesn't predate that requirement that we've had for 2 inches. And that being reflected in the plans that the applicant provided you as the commission to review in August, and that Crystal stamped and never received additional revisions on that specific change.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions for either Crystal or Brittany? Okay, thanks, Jeff. No public or no comments from the public, so let's go into deliberation. Commissioners, what are your thoughts? Does it meet the guideline?
I don't think so. 2 inches is 2 inches. Coplanar is coplanar and not inset, so yeah, support the staff on this.
Other comments, commissioners?
I agree that I think adding trim doesn't correct the problem, it sort of exacerbates it. I also agree that it's incredibly invasive to reset the window plane in a finished house. That's a non-contributing new infill structure that is addressed in the guidelines. Today's been not a fun day.
Yeah.
Landmarks
It's not been a
Commission.
fun day, it's true.
I'm thinking back to window denials, because we get into that often, and we've continued a few. The most recent one that we did approve was for a material that was acceptable for windows that were installed per the guidelines, even though they hadn't been approved, right? Thinking about, it was the 23rd, a couple weeks ago, whenever that was, there were some interior windows that had a film, it was a casement instead of a double hung, right? That's the last that we did justify. This is a different situation.
I agree with Graham that the trim, additional trim is gonna satisfy the issue. I will say if there's ever gonna be an exception to the rule, this site might apply because of it's a high traffic street, university. It's a new structure with the historic flair. I think it tries to do right by the district. And I think from the front that the black siding behind sort of the Tudor slope is quite nice. And it doesn't strike me as that it would be drastically better if the windows were set 2 inches in. As for the ones that are in the stucco, it is an ordeal to adjust those. It's the side yard, unless I'm mistaken. And I could again be persuaded to make it an exception in this case.
Yeah, I understand that it's an ordeal. I understand that, yeah, I imagine they probably have flanges on them, and that's probably why they were installed that way. And these, requirements in our guidelines require a more traditional approach to installing windows that a lot of builders aren't as used to. But I think this is a case of the guidelines are clear, and regardless of what any of us think about the aesthetics of this particular case and the particular site, I think the guidelines are very clear that this is not meeting those, and that there were drawings originally that met the guidelines. I think makes it even a more clear-cut case. So I agree with the staff report.
Gary?
Well, I agree. What frustrates me is in the 6 years I've been on this commission, I'm trying to find a nice adjective. The degree to which architects don't know how to detail windows in a building. And I mean, it just shows up. I mean, I think the original drawings actually showed an appropriate response to the guidelines and, in my opinion, a relatively decent way of detailing the windows with a 2-inch offset. That's not what happened. So, the contractor said, I don't need to pay any attention to the drawings, or I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, or the windows got changed. But there just wasn't, after the plans were approved, there was not follow through to make sure that what was done complied with the plans. And I just find that frustrating because we've seen that too often.
Erica, did you have any thoughts?
No, I think what's been said.
Okay, all right then, do I hear a motion from commissioners?
My very last.
It might be.
It is.
Might
To be a
be.
denial.
No,
Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2022-COA-324 for the addition of trim around windows at the shiplap, shiplap and stucco elevations at 331 University Boulevard as per design guidelines F3 and 4.8, character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Gary has made the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
George has seconded it. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yays, 1 nay. All right, it has been denied. All right, commissioners, that is the end of our design review projects. Business items,
I don't have any business items.
can we get an update on
Yeah, Anne
Gary's
has
replacement?
formally retired from the commission. Erin has also, which she did back in March. The mayor has candidates in for consideration. I hope they appoint someone new. But this I think will be Gary's last meeting because he is out of town for our next one. But in any case,
Everybody shows up next.
yeah, but in any case, the ordinance states that Anne, Erin, and Gary can't serve past the end of this month. So hopefully we have new commissioners soon.
Was Aaron's term up?
Yes, Erin, Anne, and Gary's term all ended in March.
We're the next pair.
We're the next pair to go, but we got another
next
year.
next
dude.
year.
We got, 8 more months, whatever.
Yeah, y'all are stuck with us for a while.
That's true.
And we do have an adjusted schedule for July. So just be aware of that we are meeting the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. So,
Yeah, because I won't be here on the second. Okay, all right, any discussion items? All right, then it is 4:31. I am closing the meeting